Okay, I'll call the meeting to order at 7:01. A quorum is present. The meeting is duly constituted. First order of business is adoption of the agenda. May I have a motion and a second? Discussion. I'll kick it off. I want to, with council's forbearance, replace 9, which is the resolution section C and D, with an on-table item, which I distributed this afternoon. So that will be, with council's agreement, will be the recommendation that we will debate. The substantive form is unchanged. It's just a little less nebulous as to what we're committing ourselves to. Can I have that on the nod?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then I also would like to ask that we strike the closed meeting justifications that we don't need. And as far as I can tell, Peter, we only need A and L. Going through the closed meeting agenda that we have seen.
Yeah, except that within the context of L, there are other items, which is why we have the full list. It's not the full list, but it's a substantive list.
Yeah, it's not the full list. If these are needed, sure.
I'd rather be safe than sorry. So
yeah, but I don't want to reserve something that we're not going to discuss. Just to
I think all these things will be discussed.
Fine. Okay, so no striking of closure reasons, and that's all I had. Anybody else?
Staff reports, so that would be 8. This is verbal subpoena. 8. 5.
V.
That'd be new council chamber update.
8.
Yeah, just a quick verbal on that. Thanks. Anybody else? Okay.
There was also a matter that I forwarded to council this afternoon with respect to consultation deadlines on passenger-directed vehicle services. And due to the dates involved, thought that ought to be added to the correspondence.
Fine. I'm good with that, so we'll add that to the correspondence section, which is, we'll just do it on the item.
Okay.
G4.
If it is G4, yeah.
Sounds right. Okay.
And you had one more, I think.
Yeah, let me just double check here. So 8A, after 1 or I, right below that, if you can add I small a, and that would be called CFO, Fire Training Trailer Septic Tank Replacement, or FTT SCR.
I like that better.
I thought you might.
Okay.
And I think that's all I have in terms of any changes.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, so there's a motion. Can I have all in favor of the motion as amended? And opposed? That carries. Welcome to new councillor Nombamaya.
Thank you.
It's going to be fun.
I hope so.
Let us know when your head starts spinning and we'll take a break. Okay, so we'll move on to public questions and comments. Yeah, you see, this is the problem where I don't take my agenda out of the binder because then I lose track. So let me just get myself back together. Sorry. Mr. Ando, would you pass us the list there, please, seeing as you're the first guy up? Thanks. Scott.
So I wanted to express my disappointment in the minutes that are in your package tonight. None of the response from the Public Works Manager were included, and I think that there should be at least 1 or lines that respond or that should be included in the minutes from his response to my question at the last regular council meeting. That's number one. The second thing that I wanted to bring to council's attention was that I read that you're asking for an extension for the CWWF grant, and I want to remind council that not all government grants are extended. I remind them of the Western Diversification Grant, which we received for the community center for $250,000. The firm date was March 31st, 2014, and we were not granted an extension, and we left $86,123 on the table. We only spent $163,877 before March 31st. So in the minutes or in the package, I see that you're only going to be 40% complete. So I'm worried that that's going to leave the village to a $1.6 million exposure, and I'm wondering what the backup plan is, what's going to happen. And then the last question I have is, it says that staff will check back to, it says follow-up action. Staff will check back with CWWF administrators in due course as to the status of our extension request. What does that mean? Shouldn't we be checking maybe even before it goes out? I don't know. Before it goes out to signing the contract or something, I don't know. But you're exposing the village, in my opinion, you may be exposing the village to 1.6 million. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. I'll respond to some of those. So the first is when we approve the minutes of the previous meeting, I will ask for a slight modification that at least just a nominal response gets put in there, because I flagged that as well. I thought that was not an adequate recording of the conversation. As far as the extension on the clean water and wastewater grant goes, I can assure you that is happening at the highest levels, the highest in the country, in fact, apparently, according to our MP. And there is a plan. So if the extension is not obtained, we have a plan B. But first we need to understand whether we're going to get the extension or not. And it is an agenda item. As you saw, there's a report from staff, and there will be some questions arising during that report. I can assure you, I've got lots of them in 2 different colors of pen. So rest assured, we're aware. No.
The 40% is 40% of the balance. So it's not 40% of the project will be completed by March 31st. 40% will be outstanding by March 31st.
So that wasn't clear, or maybe I didn't read it well.
Well, no, I read it the same way you did. So yeah, okay. Okay, well that's better, but we wanted 100%.
It is better. And then the tender's not going out until November the 20th, so how much further are we behind?
Are you able to answer that now, or?
That's the revised schedule
Okay. Okay.
that we're looking at. Yes.
Okay, so
That's
it will be in the
report.
minutes of this meeting, and I'll make sure that you get that.
Because it's not scheduled to finish until June or July of 2018, so that concerns me.
You're not the only one.
Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Anyone else?
Those are 2 minutes here.
Glenn?
Yeah, hi, my name's Glenn Dennison. I'm with the Interwater Council of BC, and I'm here to talk about the DFO request to protect glass sponges on a voluntary basis in Howe Sound. The reason being it's important for Lions Bay is that there's 3 reefs right adjacent to Lions Bay that need protection, and I'd like to see the endorsement from the village. I have a chart here if anybody wants to see where these glass sponges are with regards to the village. Here's Lions Bay here, and here's our 3 glass sponges right out in front of the village here. The significance of the glass sponge is its habitat for rockfish, and we want to see a recovery of the rockfish in Howe Sound. We have to protect those glass sponges as habitat. Thank you.
Thanks, Glenn. We will be debating that very motion tonight, but I will say today, or now, at this juncture, that I can only corroborate everything you've said. Fred and I were at the House Sound Community Forum at Gibson's, where we saw that map, and I think 90% of the people there were under the mistaken impression that glass sponge reefs were protected in House Sound. They're not. They're protected in the Strait of Georgia, but not here, not yet.
Yeah, this is a number 2 initiative from the DFO. Number 1 initiative was 7 sponges in Georgia Strait and 2 in Howe Sound. And at that point, the 13 new reefs had not been brought to the table. So this is new reefs, and they're very beautiful.
One question, if I may. The map is actually even in the package. That's right. These are just the ones we know about. Would I be correct in thinking they're everywhere in Howe Sound?
No, they're not everywhere in Howe Sound, but it doesn't mean that we've discovered all of them at this point. It takes a substantial effort to go out there and actually locate glass sponge. The sweet spot for sponge is about 250 feet down, so you can imagine the difficulties of locating them and mapping these sites. But these are probably the largest that we're going to discover to date, so whatever's left is reasonably small.
Great, thanks. Well, I hope you stick around until we get to that point, but it's quite far on in the program, so I understand if you need to take off, but I look forward to debate on that one. Any other public participation? Seeing none, I'll move on to delegations. There being none of those, we'll review the minutes of the prior meetings. The first is the regular council meeting of October 17th, starting on page 7. So I'll take a motion to approve these minutes. Thanks, and a second. And discussion. The first, of course, is under section 3 that we just embroider the recording of what happened there in the public participation piece. Just to say the public works manager responded at the whatever he said at the very highest level, with a schedule and an awareness or something. If I can go first, under 8A, the by-election and staffing report, I think that level of detail is unnecessary. That's not exactly what happened. I started editing what it was that I said. I didn't query the plan. I asked whether contractors rather than consultants were being hired rather than using staff. That's all I asked. But I would suggest we just strike that entire paragraph and say moved and seconded that the verbal staff update regarding the by-election and staffing be received, rather than open a can of worms. I see some nods around the table. Okay, so that's good. Thank you. Under 10A, the Land Reserve Fund bylaw. I didn't question the need for the bylaw. I questioned whether it was broad enough. So what I suggest we do is just strike that entire sentence. From Mayor Burr to its form, second and last lines on page 11 of the package. And so I'm seeing some nods on that. Thank you. So then over the page, and then I would say that the text should say as being necessary to address all types of sale of lands, rather than address the circumstances related sale of lands, which I think is a typo.
Yeah. So sorry, what is it you're striking? Because I thought you were striking everything after.
No, just I'm striking the final full sentence on page 11. That's Mayor Burr questioned the need for the bylaw and/or its form. So just strike that entirely.
Just that sentence.
Just that sentence.
Okay.
And then replace on the next page the circumstances related with the words all types of. Because I think we all got it. I think this is a typo coming from somewhere else. And then finally, under the RCMP Integrated Teams Annual Report, I'm just wondering whether it's worth doing this. This may get back to the RCMP, and it sounds a little derogatory as it is right now. I mean, it is actually in the public arena already, but perhaps if you'd bear with me, I'll just read it and I'll give this to you later, Peter, just to follow the flow. Mayor Burr noted that the Integrated Conditional Analysis and Reconstruction Services stat was incorrect in the report as there were at least 3 incidents in the period where ICARS was presumably involved. He did not suggest requesting an amendment to the report, but simply wished to bring it to Council's attention. I think that's a lot less threatening and snippy. I'll give you that text later, Peter, if everybody can take that one on the nod. That's all I had. Fred?
I got one on 8, B, 8B1D on page 10. I don't want to split hairs on this, but it goes one fewer speed zone may produce less variability in speeds, comma, a primary cause of accidents. I guess it works with having a primary cause, but I think if you have a conversation with Lions Bay Fire Rescue, they would indicate that excessive speed is the primary cause of fatalities on our stretch of the road. So whether they vary the speeds or not, if you're still doing 150k through Lions Bay, they're going to get hurt.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with amending it. This has already gone to Modi as being the approved, the resolved text. So you'd have to make a motion to resolve the resolution, because this is what was resolved in writing.
Fair enough. Just a comment. What you say is undoubtedly true, but I think the intent of the resolution and the materials was to address the various changes in speed as well as many other things. I'm not sure if it's referenced elsewhere in the resolution, but excessive speed would certainly be top of anyone's list in terms of causes of injury and death. But I don't know that it necessarily speaks to what it is that this resolution is attempting to convey, or the purpose of it.
Well, that's the point. Saying as the word "a primary cause" kind of lets it sneak by, I guess. But
Yeah.
I just didn't want to let anybody think that this is where we're focused on as the primary cause.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, on the contrary, I think 1A above speaks to speed, where it says, 1B, sorry, 60 may be too slow, 110 is too fast. Yeah, you make a valid point, but it's a nicety, and I mean, if you want to, we'd have to rescind the motion, or rescind the resolution, do it again. It's not a bylaw, so we can do it on the fly.
No, I'm fine.
You're fine with it? Okay. So this is the resolution as it was passed, and as it has been passed on to Modi, in fact. Okay, so no change there. You good with that, Fred?
Yep.
I don't want to... Okay. Ron? Staff? No? Okay, so as amended, there's a motion on the table. All in favor? Opposed? That carries. So that is the minutes approved. And then the minutes of the special council meeting of October 24th, starting on page 15. I had no changes. Anybody? May I have a motion to approve and a second? Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. I'm going to bring 2 binders in future. Business arising from the minutes. Peter, did you have any? When I read it the first time online on the weekend, there were several things I wanted to discuss, and now I can't find them, so that's probably good from a time perspective. So we'll move on to unfinished business. There's only one. I can report on that very quickly. Haven't done it yet. So we'll move on to reports under section 8, staff reports. The first being very meaty report starting on page 19. I trust that we have all read the report, so that we don't need to go through its minutiae other than questions raised. But first I'll take a motion to receive and a second, and discussion. Ron.
I'm fine with the verbatim that Pam was giving me. I guess the general comment is that we're so vastly over in cash that it's stunning.
Well, that's something that I'll be commenting on as we go through the individual department results. But yeah, I mean, the report as it stands is good. How do you want to do this, Pam? Receive the report and then go through the things, or is this part of the report?
This is all part of the
Okay, so we're
report,
going to go through it
it's-
in some
yeah,
detail now.
Your choice if you want to go in detail, and I can answer any questions.
Okay, fine. So, any headline comments on the text of the report before we dive into some of the numbers?
I like the clarity and the nice vision. Well,
Well, I mean, yeah, and it also sort of points out some of the things.
thank you.
Okay, so let's then move on. Let's just go page by page so we don't go back and forth, back and forth. So on the consolidated financials, that's on page 22. Any? Moving on to page 23. I'll just point out one thing that I found kind of interesting. Well, several things actually. The secondary suite surcharge fees of 20,685. This is just a number we need to bear in mind as we go through a strategic discussion on whether we want to do away with secondary suite fees. That is a not insubstantial number in Lions Bay. That money would have to be divided up amongst all utility users if we did do away with it. The second is in-kind revenue of 90. What is that, Pam?
That's basically when we do the municipal grants, they get cash, but they also get in-kind. So it's an entry we do at the end of the year. We want to book the value of public works time and the hall rental to
The other side of the journal
to the
entry.
other side, yeah. So it's
Yeah.
basically, it's in and out, but I think it's important to show it's sort of in a way lost revenue. And then the expense gets charged to the
Although
to the
you have
actual
this in the
municipal
revenue
grant.
section.
Yes, so it is. It's an in-kind revenue, so it's
Yeah.
a non-cash revenue, and then it allows us to show what the true cost of the municipal grant is.
Yeah, good. Okay, got it. Everybody good on that one? And then the other thing that I found interesting was for the first time we see a number on parking revenue this year, 16,337. Is that final?
Yes.
That's
It's
net
accurate.
of
It's
tax.
And that's
yeah,
net.
Yeah.
So that's net of the 23% TransLink tax,
Mhm.
Yeah, that's
net
the
of the
big
credit
one.
card collection fees and service fees and
the
everything.
GST on that, and yes, so that's just the net revenue after all costs.
We
And
claim the
taxes
GST
we
back though,
collected.
don't we?
Yes, that's what I mean. So
It's
it's
a-
net of GST
it's-
as well.
it's net
So it's
back,
not
yeah.
included in that number.
And it covers a date range of July 18th, I think,
Mhm.
till September 30th.
So it wasn't the full season.
July, August, September, 2.5 months. Okay. Anybody else? Moving on.
So parking report still to come.
Understood. I was.
You know, in reality, that offsets the secondary suites.
What I really am looking for that, we'll see in the parking report, but I'm looking for that to offset the cost of additional bylaw enforcement hours.
Well, it would have to also cover off such things as fencing requirements
Yeah.
likely necessary and a whole other host of things. that
And
we
we got
haven't
the
even
meters for
gotten
free
into
this
yet.
time, didn't
Yes,
we?
exactly.
Yeah.
Additional costs.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
that was on a free trial. So
Yeah.
it's less than I was wishing for. Not I was hoping. I didn't know what I was hoping for, but it's less than I was wishing for. Okay, so we'll move on to page 24. The call-out fees are significantly lower than budget.
Yes, it's always, that's offset by lower, it's a ratio of the revenue versus the cost of going out to the calls. So the net impact on the bottom line is fairly neutral. It's always a bit of a guess every year. We do find it's down a bit this year. And then we do an accrual at the year end for any outstanding PEP claims because this is cash basis until year end.
Right.
And then for the audit purposes required to accrue. But we are tracking less than prior years. Like I said, that will be offset by reduced call-out time and
Yeah.
charges to the firefighters.
Fred, is this something that you've been expecting anecdotally, that call-outs on the highway were less than a third of what we were expecting?
Well, it is a strange turn. No, I wasn't expecting to see it. I'm not sure really what to make of it at this point.
What does the fire department say?
This will go up substantially before the end of the year. Like I said, we do the accrual at the end of the year, any outstanding PEP claims.
But
It is
the-
down, but it's not quite down.
But you've only got a
25%.
quarter left. I mean, presumably this is everything through the 30th of September.
And mathematically, it's a third.
No, what I'm saying is I didn't put the accruals in there. This is cash basis, so this is probably only to about April or May.
Oh,
It's
they-
too
it
hard
takes
to
that
accrue
long?
them. We, rather than
Okay.
accrue them, it's just,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
a lot
Oh,
of work.
they pay that
and,
far behind?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so that number
like I say,
one,
it's really only accurate, but it is tracking less than what we budgeted, but the budget's always a bit of a guess.
Your sense is by how
Yeah.
much less? Not by 2/3.
Well, if you look at the year-to-date actual from 2016, it's substantially less than what we budgeted.
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just wondering if that is an illustration of success of some of the measures we're taking. That's where I'm going with that.
Yeah, don't know.
And how do you know? You ask the guy driving through, why didn't you crash in Lions Bay? And he'll say, well, I didn't feel like it.
The new barrier scared you.
Yeah.
That's sign with the speed thing, yeah.
Connection fees, what are those?
Connection fees are basically with new houses, so that's tied into the higher building permit revenue. That's why it's so much higher. There's a new house, there's a connection fee, so we have a flat fee to connect to the, I guess, the water connection and the sewer connection.
It's just a different fee structure,
And
or
it's a
that
slightly
many
different,
more.
but there's just that many more. We have a lot of new. It happens mostly with the new builds, and there are quite a few new builds. We anticipated a lot of them. We increased the budget a lot for building permits, but we're still tracking even favorable to that.
Okay.
And a minor item on page 24, the fire department, the bank return on investment, most of us would like to get a 206% return. How does the fire department arrange that?
I'm sorry.
Bank return on investment?
Well, that's not the return. It's just I under budgeted it. I did take into account the extra money we have, but I hadn't realized we'd be getting that advance payment from the CWWF. Plus, interest rates have gone up a little bit.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
that's
that's
why
true.
we're so
Yeah.
favorable. But I wasn't expecting that 700,000
So,
advance on the clean
So
water.
the fund is just adequately performing.
Yeah, it's still pretty low given the amount of money in there. Okay, so anything else on that page? Moving on. Now we come to. I'm sure you have a hotkey on your computer that says work will continue into 2018 requiring a rebudget of funds. Because if I read it once, I must have read it 20 times.
Yes,
in
and
there.
I also felt that it was important to give you a heads
Absolutely.
up on that, and rather than just shocking you at the end of the year. So I spent a lot of time on that, determining what would have to be rebudgeted and what wouldn't.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't need to tell anybody, but I will mention it just for edification of the record that this is money that's been taxed for and not spent. So it will inform our budget discussion for 2018.
But if I may just say with the asset management plan, part of that was, we knew we had to do something this year, but we're now working with a consultant and we have a plan which we'll discuss at the strategic plan, but that was, I also didn't want to spend it just for the sake of spending it, like with the asset management. We could have done some somewhat frivolous stuff with asset management, but we felt it was important to,
And that
get our
attracts an
best use out
80%
of the
grant,
money.
doesn't it?
Yeah, we're actually decided now to do 2 grants. At the recommendation of the consultant, he said we should delay going to the FCM grant. We're not sure, there's an uncertainty in terms of how successful you would be. And he said we have almost a guaranteed chance to get an infrastructure planning grant, finally. We're applying for one of those, and the UBCM grant. And then he said he would recommend that to get sort of the asset management plan in place, and then go for the FCM grant for further things in a year or 2.
Yeah, there's a question about a grant that I have that will come up later. Okay. Good on this, Council? Okay, we're moving to page 26. I had one question. The election cost there, what is that, $1,600?
That's just the, at that point, that would have probably been some election training, and then that big cost that comes in after that is the labor.
That doesn't
the
include
day.
the second by-election, but does include the first by-election.
No, this is the by-election we just had. The other by-election was last year.
This is only through September. The by-election was
Yes,
in...
we had some early costs. I mean, we
Okay.
had to purchase some supplies and we had some training. And then what I'm saying is that we're estimating we'll still be about 2,200 favorable. We had budgeted 10,000, and we're probably going to spend about 7,800
Okay.
in total.
Oh, that's right. The other by-election was last year, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
Now, the reason I flagged this was not actually for that. Metro, we just did the Metro budget, as you probably know. They accrue the cost of an election over 4 years.
We do that as well.
Oh.
So that's why the budget's 14,000. I had 10 in for the by-election, but we accrue 4,000.
4,000?
It's a standard practice in municipalities that you
Just to
take
make it
a
less
quarter. It
lumpy.
used to be a third, and now it's a quarter.
Okay.
And then we will draw that. It's essentially going into a reserve, and then we draw it from the reserve next year. And we'll just budget an additional 4,000. It's like an income smoothing for
Yeah.
an expense we know we're going to have.
Yeah, it's just a smoothing issue. which I'm all for, because we have to tax for it, right? Okay, moving on. I had nothing on the next page. Fire department, special detail budget. One question there, salaries and benefits.
Yes.
That's only 50%, whereas I would expect to see 75% spent.
But that's because we only pay them twice a year.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was the
And that was
answer.
why,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, and the question I had was including chief and trainer.
Yes.
The budget
The
and
trainer is in the, because it's a consultant, that's in training and professional development, but the chief is in the salaries and benefits.
okay, fine. Everybody good
And
with
he is the only exception. We do pay him monthly, but everyone else, they're paid in June and then December. So that's why they're tracking less than.
that? Okay, so that'll only come out
It's
in the
on
wash
track.
in the end.
In
yeah.
fact, I'm expecting that to be a little bit favorable just because of the reduced call-outs. I mean, they get their shift payments, which is unchanged, but
Yeah.
the call-out portion should be a bit lower than budgeted.
Okay. Bylaw services. You call the cost here salaries and benefits rather than contract services, but are the bylaw enforcement officers
Yes,
employees?
Yeah, they're union employees.
So they're on payroll.
They're called temporary, yes, they're on payroll.
Okay.
And
I'll just point out to council, we budgeted and we're expecting 12 hours a day bylaw services, but we only got 8, which is
on the Saturday.
yeah, which is not great. But sometimes the practicalities. 107k for railway crossing maintenance, right? We don't maintain the railway.
Oh, yes. So I had mentioned that at the mid-year review as well, that we were unsuccessful with the grant,
Yeah.
but we want to apply again. So my recommendation would be just to rebudget the expense and then apply for the grant again.
Yeah, did we tax for that?
We
The 107?
taxed for the differential
Between the,
We would have different.
between the grant.
yeah, and we
22
thought,
grand.
yeah, it was
20%.
an 80% grant, wasn't
Yes,
it? Yeah,
yes.
okay, okay, good. Although 20 grand is, well over a percentage point tax.
I have a question. It shows up on a few of them after this. What are the internal allocations that you're referring to?
That's for the fund accounting. We have the water fund and the sewer fund and then the general fund. And we're required to sort of all treat them as separate funds. So there's staff time that is spent on water and sewer. So it's just sort of an allocation of what we feel the costs are, just so that we're taxing properly. When we're taxing water, we're fully taxing for the cost that are incurred of staff time. It's a very common intercompany thing with almost all municipalities, that you don't have like a standalone fund where people just work in that fund. There's a lot, especially at the management level, there's sort of a crossover. So you should see it in the solid waste, solid waste, water, sewer, and then it's shown as income in the, not income, but as a negative expense in the general fund.
Yeah, it's just an
And
allocation
it nets to zero.
So that we are fairly and correctly reflecting the costs of the various funds.
Utility, yeah.
Okay. Everybody good? Can we move on? Planning and development, everybody? Peter, the professional fees were significantly less than budgeted, and that is because, note 1,
It's the planner.
Actually, it's.
why did we not spend the money?
Pam, can you provide that explanation, because there was a couple of things that were
Yes.
different about this that.
Well, we spent the 18, but we will spend an additional 25 before the end of the year for the natural hazards assessment, and additional 7,500 for Steve, and then we budget the balance.
But that wasn't even, is this budget number the approved change to the budget? Because that $25,000 natural hazards assessment came up in the middle of the year. It wasn't even in the budget.
No, we're saying of what was budgeted, we will use some of those funds for that natural
Oh, I
hazard.
see. Okay,
yeah.
fine.
So you said 25, and what was the other number, Pam?
18.
7,500 for Steve Olmsted, that we extended his contract. And then we have been doing land surveys and appraisals, and we had budgeted 12,000 for that, but we might go a little bit over on that.
So we're, with the 25 and the 7.5, we're gonna come in at 50 versus an 86 budget. More on that, okay.
Again, this is not good, because council was expecting to get that level of work out of the budget that we approved. So we're short $30,000 worth of work. So that's not cool.
You know, we had, on that theme, Carl, I guess this is as much for Peter, council was of the view that we would give a big budget here to outsource whatever you think could be done. And we did a variety of things that were outsourced, but is there stuff that you wish you had done, or are you?
Well,
I mean,
you know, there's part of when you outsource something, it's not simply a case of it's off your plate and somebody else is doing it. You don't have to think about it.
Mhm.
You have to manage that. And some of what I think some of what I thought we might be able to get to, such as outsourcing servicing by law,
Mhm.
and things of that nature, I couldn't find the time within the work plan to get that done. And it wasn't just a case of finding somebody to do it, because there was a couple of different ways to go on that, and I wanted to pursue the less expensive ways of going about that, which were, you know, basically doing some research and getting servicing bylaws from other communities that we could more or less work with,
Mhm.
even if we needed to then take it to somebody and get them to finish it off. But in terms of time constraints and the ability to do that, just didn't get there.
Yeah, I mean, we all know that consulting is a 1 + 1 = 3 situation. I understand, I think, but we were expecting to get $121,000 worth of planning work done, and so far we've had $38,000, and not much more to come.
See, my expectation and recollection from the last budget cycle was a request. My request was for $60,000 for planning. So some of these other things come into play, but that's initially what the request was.
Yeah, but council wanted 121.
Yeah, so
Well, we were pushing a bigger budget for you. The place was bursting at the seams.
Yeah, because we wanted to move ahead on some of these strategic initiatives.
yeah. But the other thing is that, you know, the zoning bylaw process took an extended period of time, as you know, it was a big piece of work, and then there's pieces that flow out of it, which I expected to have. I mean, the comment was made that we weren't expecting to do the natural hazards assessment study. That's not quite correct, because I was expecting that development permits, which were in the zoning bylaw, needed to be moved to the OCP, which is part of this process. So it was a planning item that I did anticipate would be part of this work to be done. But yeah, it's all very time consuming.
Okay, fine. I mean, so yeah, we will underspend that budget, which is, you know, it's a third of the public works budget. You know, it's a significant number for a place like Lions Bay.
I've got another question. The zoning consultant's contract extended to the end of the year. Is he active, or is that a retainer, or?
Oh yeah, he's working on the wildfire aspects of the development permit.
The DP.
Oh, okay.
And we'll work with the consultant on the sea level aspect of it. And the consultant is out in the field and doing all his mapping work, and so this is actively underway.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay, everybody good? We move on? Thanks. Parks and Rec. Again, a fairly significant budget. Most of this is internal allocations and salaries and benefits, right now?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Other than the 20,000 from Moby.
$112,000. That's just an allocation of staff costs.
No, the under maintenance we have the landscaping plan. 20,000 is in here.
Yeah, no, I'm asking about the salaries and benefits number, 112,000.
Sorry, what was the question? Is
That's
it
an internal allocation of
It's not
staff
an-
costs?
not really an internal allocation. When the staff do their timesheets, they record it where they've actually done the work.
Okay,
So,
divvying up.
yeah, so it's just staff time. That's all.
So it's well ahead of 75, well, not well ahead, but it's ahead of 75%. That means that we spent more time than we anticipated.
That's partly a timing, because the bulk of that time is charged over the summer.
Yeah.
Now there'll be less, so I'm
Yeah,
anticipating
bed
it will be.
maintenance, grass trimming, all of that drops off in the winter.
Yeah. And it's also our best guess. We have the total public works costs, and we do our best to say this much will be spent on sewer, this
Yeah.
much on water.
Yeah.
And we're always off a little bit. Yeah, on total, we're totally on track.
The
with
things that are
public works
predictable
salaries.
are to the penny, so
Yeah. Yeah.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with our budgeting process. Maybe the numbers need to be looked at, but the actual process. Where does snow clearing, does this go under Park and Rec or under Public Works?
Public works.
Okay. Case in point, solid waste budget is smack on, more or less.
Well, I don't want to jinx it, it's kind of hard to mess that up.
Yeah,
Because we have a revenue, we have a contract, we have an extra $2,000 of expenses.
Let's see.
Hey, take it when.
Leap to page 34. Okay.
And same for sewer. I mean, it's fairly well understood. And there you see the illustration of how well understood it is. It's about exactly as expected, on track, right?
We put a lot of effort into this budget, actually. In the past, we've been very favorable, and it's because there just hasn't been the time to spend on it, and we adjusted accordingly, and the budget is much more accurate this year.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's now bearing fruit, and we'll actually see the benefit of it in this coming budget process for the first time, because we'll be starting with more realistic numbers.
Actually, one thing I wanted to mention about Public Works, I guess we didn't really skip over it, but I did mention that with the Public Works, we always have the big no, and you made with the winter road maintenance that,
Yeah, I saw
you know,
that.
if we do anticipate, the budget is pretty much gone. It was wiped out in the early part of the year, the last part of last winter, so we are anticipating to have go over budget in that before the end of the year.
And I saw a report now from you somewhere where you expect a similar level of effort this year.
Yeah, according to current forecasts and the La Nina effect, yeah.
Yeah, so that's salt and hours.
Salt and hours, correct, yeah.
So we're talking well in the overtime budget, where we will go over. I think unless there's inordinate amounts of overtime, we should be okay there, just go a bit over. It's for the materials, for the salt. I mean, our salt budget is pretty much depleted, so.
Is salt expensive?
Yeah, it's fairly expensive. Quantity-wise, we used 140 tons of salt last year.
What does
I
that
don't know
cost?
what the total budget was.
Yeah, I can't remember either.
Yeah.
I just know we've used it all up. So
Yeah.
but we have room in the Public Works, so because we're running maybe a little bit favorable on some other things. It was just a heads up to council that not everything is favorable.
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, I was just touching on this, not that it's this report issue, but I mean, it was noticeable, and I'm still getting notes from residents how well we did compared to North Van and Vancouver and West Van in terms of our snow clearance. And that level of effort is appreciated and needs to be sustained. So if it's a budget issue, let's make sure we take care of that this coming budget. Okay, moving on. Where did we get to? Water
So
fund.
page 35.
We seem a little underspent on salaries and benefits there, than 75%. What was the thinking there? What's the reason there?
Again, that can just be a pure allocation.
Yeah.
In total, Public Works is on budget. It's just, we're a little over in parks, a little under. It's always hard to get the exact, to predict exactly how much staff will be spending in each area, and so.
We also didn't have as much inspection or work up at the intakes because we've had contractors working up there for an extended period of time. So the level of inspection for the intakes dropped because we constantly had people up there monitoring.
So they were essentially proxies.
Yeah, they would, if there was an issue, they'd call us and say, hey.
We should do that more often.
Come up with the capital for replacing the wheel.
Okay. So just to remind people that our water budget is significantly less than we thought, but the budget is $818,000. That is $1,600 per house, which is not insubstantial for water. How is it that it was so much more than 2016? Just remind me. I can't remember the reason.
Our budget is more.
Yeah, our budget is 818 this year, and it was 604 last year, or 604 actual. Is that because we underspent on certain things?
Part of it, amortization was a chunk because of the new assets, so we'd have to start amortizing
Yeah.
the maintenance, and it was the professional fees. And we are tracking favorable there, but we knew that when we did the budget, we didn't know if we'd be successful with the clean water grant. So as I had flagged to council, there were some items we had to put in there that now will be covered by the grant because we were successful with the grant.
And we also had the AECOM
The EECOM,
in
yes.
2016.
Yeah, when we go through the budget process, we're going to need to get an understanding of how much money, we've seen this report this year for this budget process. We saw how much money we taxed for that we didn't use, and we're going to need to see that report again. I heard the expression used already, we left money on the table. This is taking money from the taxpayer that we didn't need to. Meaning that those projects now very much need to get on the schedule. Okay. Capital expenditures. It is correctly as of
Yes,
October 31,
yes.
not September
What I do,
30th.
because this is such an substantial expense and I'm able to do it, I try to get it as current as
Yeah.
possible at the time of the meeting.
So this is hot off the press.
Yes.
Ron, I think you had some comments here.
Well, I think Pam, I mean, the main numbers are the grant, first item, and small number on the actual, big number on the budget.
Well, we're going to see a report on that later, so let's defer the discussion to
And I
discussion in
think
the report.
the other thing too is the cellular communications. Re-budget and nowhere here.
Sorry, where's that?
Second item.
Second item.
Okay. Yeah.
So with that, and it was discussed at the IC, the SCADA cellular communication study that budget amount represents is incorporated into the clean water wastewater. So
So we need to unbudget that.
we need to unbudget it based upon what their recommendations are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although we did tax for that.
Yet again, we tax for it.
But we talked about, we did discuss that. We knew there were a few things that we needed to do if we didn't get the
We
grant.
had to reserve
so
the
we were
funds,
forced.
yeah.
But we knew the advantage of that, it would flow into reserves. So, I mean, it's not, the money's not lost.
And when it was budgeted, we didn't have a clean water wastewater grant.
No,
So-
no, I think we were
We tried to minimize them, but there were 2 or 3 things we had to budget because if we didn't get the grant, we would have had to
Well,
do them.
Well, there will
Yes.
likely be recommendations flowing out of the econs report that will need money.
extra
Mhm.
to the 2.71.
Could be, yeah.
Could be. Yeah, we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Okay.
So quickly nipping down here then, so, the big one, the 750 for 63 Brunswick, fine. The detailed bridge inspection, that'll be done by the year end, I'm gonna guess. The beach park, which is one below, that's in abeyance for now. Kelvin Grove, it's gonna be done by the year end. Stairs to the bus, a touchy little topic.
Just back to Kelvin Grove, the initial report we had from Satori Environmental is that he recommends a concrete set of stairs at the very bottom and a pathway down. But he's confirmed that any sort of work that we do will require DFO approval. So that's not gonna happen until the fish window, which is next summer.
Which fish?
The fish that crawl up the stairs.
Yeah. I think those are salmon, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, it is what it is. Yeah, DFO is...
Except that the pathway work though would be,
The pathway work can happen.
Can happen.
but you don't want people going down there and then falling down the cliff at the end.
Correct. There's a 1.2 meter to a 1.6 meter drop
Mm.
at the bottom of that
Yeah.
stair.
No, it's got to be done all in one shot.
The Lions Bay Avenue stair, I will just, reiterate that we went out to tender. We went to 5 or 6 different contractors. We only received 2 bids, and both of them are substantially higher than the grant.
Well, let's talk about that now, seeing as we have to. I mean, we heard that it was vital to replace those stairs. What are we going to
Yeah.
do?
I don't know as of yet.
That's a valid answer.
It will result in increased monitoring and maintenance. We are gonna have to spend extra time looking at the stairs, looking at the edges, looking at the concrete. The worry is that the concrete edges will give way if you put too much weight on them. So I don't know how we're gonna address that right now.
Fred?
Well, I'm kind of baffled by this, because I read Nine's RFPs before, and they're extremely detailed, and yet when you see bids come in at 62,250, I think, how can that be?
Well, they're throwing spaghetti to the wall.
Well, I think they're throwing.
It's a cash grab, and we try and get any contractor to do any work anybody else, so, I mean, municipality, fair game.
So, yeah, I mean, one of the options we discussed internally as a staff group is that there are precast step sections that we can purchase. And we may be able to bring that price down by using precast stair sections and landings. But again, we'd have to revise the RFP and go out.
You'd still use contract labor for it.
Yeah.
So the 250 becomes only 125?
Yeah, because that's where they're getting us. Where I'm going on that one is, can we repurpose that grant for its original purpose, which is a bus shelter?
I don't know.
Because that's what people are actually asking for. I get asked about it weekly, on average.
I will ask the administrator.
This
Well,
is
it
the
doesn't get
TransLink
away- That
administrator.
doesn't get away from the problem of the stairs, though.
No,
No,
no, it doesn't solve that problem.
We
And
would
those
have to-
stairs, our kids walk down those stairs every day, 9 months a year.
Yeah, we would have to reapply for that grant in the new year.
I don't want to push our luck, although yeah, I can certainly talk to TransLink, at the side of meetings.
Maybe we should just keep it 25 grand as a bird in hand here.
If
No.
if the funds
Yeah.
are not expended by December 31st, it goes.
Yeah.
It's a reimbursement of the costs you expend, and they have to be expended. We looked into extending it, and it's not possible, but they said there would be no problems reapplying for it. It hasn't hurt us at all. That, I think they appreciated our honesty. We went back and we couldn't do it because the original quotes we got were a lot changed since we got
But
the
we
first
can
one.
get a bus shelter for that.
Absolutely, less than that. So I will ask.
Should strike that from the recording.
No, I mean, it's 50% grant, so we'll have to
Oh,
submit
yeah.
receipts. It's not a case of just taking the money and spending it. But it would actually serve a community's desire. Nobody really sees the need for the steps. I mean, we understand. Although it's been mentioned.
Well, we
People
also-
who know about steps have mentioned.
Yeah, we also want finished projects.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
will send an email to the administrator tomorrow and ask.
Peter, you look like you were going to say something. Something cogent.
No, it's not cogent enough to say.
Can you,
I'll pass.
can I make a note to tell us where you are with that next meeting?
Sure.
Just as a kind of a verbal staff thing.
Well, it's mid-November, so we've got a month and a half. Can we get a prefab bus shelter?
Yeah, they are all prefab. Yeah, that's what I'm assuming we'd be getting.
We'll talk about it offline, but I mean,
Sure.
there are places where you have to have a sort of fairly hardened bus shelter because it gets destroyed very quickly otherwise. But Lions Bay is not one of those places, I think. Although, I mean, I see we have our share of graffiti and okay, so we'll talk about that separately.
Okay, so to go on, page 36 is complete. I mean, going through the next bunch, it's, emergency generator, there's an explanation for that, I guess, which is in the middle of the page 37. But re-budget next year seems to be a phrase that's on speed dial.
Well, I
Again,
think the
we had
initial.
talked about that at the time,
Yeah.
though, sorry.
Yeah.
That it would be 15 this year and 15 next year. It's in the 5-year plan for an additional 15. We would either buy one at 30 or two at 15.
Okay.
And just remind us now, it is unequivocal that the room size, it's about as big as this room, generated behind the fire hall, is not adequate.
Yes, it is. We had it checked out by an electrician.
Oh, it is adequate.
It is not.
It is not adequate.
Yeah.
in terms of-
bad.
Yeah, in terms of its capacity.
Right.
So I think the next item is the street signage parking plan, which is in abeyance. We understand that. Moseying through, the big one would be the fire cap maintenance, and that's going to be done by year end. Turnout gear, I'm sure the chief knows when he needs it.
That's the
And-
Whistler grant, actually.
Yeah.
So we had to wait until we got the grant. We were successful, so we're just ordering it now. I
And
just had wanted to say something about fire capital maintenance. I have gone over this in detail with the chief. The only thing that might be in doubt, the hall exhaust system, given the issues we're having with having got quotes when we did the budget and now time to do the work, there's concern that either he'll have trouble getting someone in to do the work, or it'll come in higher. So that's the only one I would flag as being. The other ones, it's just a matter of ordering them.
There's a lot of infrastructure money sloshing around the economy right now, and people, it's just simple Keynesian economics.
So to finalize the page, it's the burn building, and that's making its way. There's good news there. So Pam, I stole your thunder on this, but thanks for the details.
Yeah, that's a big capital budget, $4 million, which we've spent a quarter of. Mostly, of course, with the clean water, wastewater. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. Okay, so that was it. Is there a motion on the table to receive the report? I think there is.
It's not really a capital item. It's not in the budget, but as you know, we've had the fire at the FIT training center, so trailer. So, sorry, go ahead.
Before you get into that, I think the intent was to vote on receiving it. I think you just.
Is this an amendment to the report, or
No.
is this is extra,
this
right?
This is the additional item. So if you want to just pass the motion to receive the report.
Yeah, okay. Let's do the report as we saw it in the package. All in favour? Opposed? That carries. So Pam, now we're at the A section.
Yes, so we basically found a trailer which has been approved by the adjuster that we're going to purchase, but we did need to have some engineering done, and a geotech engineer, and they've given us some requirements for the preparation of the site. So we're going to hopefully get some work done on that this week. But as part of this, I may pass over to our Public Works Manager to give a more articulate explanation, but it does involve some work on the septic tank.
So the new facility is double the size of the old facility. The footprint that the new building will go on, the septic tank, the storage tank, is going to be underneath the building. So we won't.
The existing septic tank.
The existing. So we won't be able to pump it out. It has to be relocated. In talking to contractors, because there's a surround of pea gravel, trying to delicately remove that tank without damaging it. First we need to pump it out, then we try and remove it without damaging it. The concern is that it's going to get damaged, and it's almost as cost effective to buy a new tank rather than spend finicky hours on a machine trying to excavate around and save this tank.
Yeah, this is a 600-gallon fiberglass tank, I assume.
Yeah.
But that's only the scratching the surface. As soon as you touch an on-site wastewater system, it has to be redesigned, re-inspected, and rebuilt.
This is just a storage tank, it's not a wastewater system. It's a septic tank that just stores the waste and gets pumped out on a regular basis.
Oh, so no field.
No field.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're good.
Okay. Cost?
So the cost will be about $5,100, but to cover, I just said no greater than $5,500. So what the resolution is that council approve the capital purchase of a septic tank replacement for the fire training trailer for an amount no greater than $5,500 to be funded from surplus and/or reserves.
Okay, so that's in addition to the capital budget of $30,000.
This is not the burn building. This is the training center. This is all covered by insurance. The only reason this isn't covered by insurance is
Okay.
yeah.
It's new.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm going to make the ask, but I mean, I kind of know what the answer is going to be. So, with the adjuster, so this will be an additional capital expenditure.
Can I have a motion and a second? Discussion? $5,500. It's a lot of money for a small fiberglass tank. Well, I guess it's not that small. If it doesn't have an outflow.
No, it doesn't have an outflow.
Yeah.
Oh, there's the gravel and all the rest of it that has to
And the
be.
labor.
Pea gravel.
The work
That's
to go with it.
installed.
Yes.
Yes, this is installed. This is the full cost of relocating the tank.
What are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. Motion on the table. Any further discussion? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. Okay, thank you, Pam. We'll move on to your next report, which is the work plan, or what did you call it?
I call it the finance work plan.
Work plan. Sorry, on page 39.
So, this is preliminary. This serves a few purposes. Internally, it's a purpose where we take all our deadlines and we work backwards from the deadlines to determine the dates we need first and second readings of utility bylaws and And that's what I start with, but then it used to be an internal document, and then we started sharing it with council, just so they could sort of see the flow of what has to happen, pretty much starting now until June 30th, when all the financial deadlines come. I stress that it's preliminary because I know I've just sort of at a high level done the budget in terms of working backwards from when it has to be done, but I know council would like the budget process to go quicker this year. So like I said, it is preliminary. We may be speaking about some of this during the strategic planning sessions, but I usually present this to council, usually a little bit later in the year, but it's just
It's good to have it
kind of a
now.
heads up of, because it's challenging to do because, the water sewer, because the utility bills go out in February, we have to approve the water and sewer and solid waste budget earlier than the whole budget.
Yeah, at a minimum or a maximum, latest by a certain time.
Exactly.
But we could do it earlier.
We could do the budget earlier. I don't know that we could do the utilities any earlier. I mean, it's tight to get the utilities done. It pretty much has to be done by the middle of January. in
Yeah, I
order
mean,
to get the
there's
readings done.
precedence and dependence, and we're going to work that all out. But we'll talk about the details at the strategy session. I mean, I think there is a sort of a general consensus from council that we want to accelerate the process by a number of weeks, taking into account that there's some slack in various things that they don't have to be.
That's right.
They're not critical path items.
And I have already moved this budget ahead of what it was last year.
I see some earlier dates than we're used to. Yeah, I mean, I think we're just looking at accelerating the process and not having as many reviews. Yeah.
To that, and I'm on page 42, Pam, thank you for the details on this, but, and again, as you say, we'll talk about it, and I understand the procedures that you need to go through, but a common theme is, if we're going to do CapExes and do RFPs and all the rest of that, I think we need to give staff the opportunity to do that sooner rather than later. So that's the budget piece. So I think where you've got the Tuesday, the Jan 9th and the 23rd for preliminary budget and budget presentation, perhaps for the strategy session, if you could think how we might give you I hate to just throw terms around that might make you cringe, if we gave you a broad budget to get staff going early on core things that we know we want to do, that would accelerate a bunch of the actual doing of the stuff, I think. And I realize it makes your life very complicated. So the ask is, can we do a broad budget and then amend it?
Well, before we go there, Ron, I'd like to ask a related question. That is, I see here preliminary budget to council January 9th, budget presentation to council January 23rd, another budget presentation to council February 6th, and another budget presentation to council February 19th.
When I say budget presentation, I mean, to me, that's where we talk about the capital. We're going to have a lot of stuff on the table, but I can tell you now we're not going to have enough money. And I think we're going to have the hardest decisions we've ever had with the budget now, and that's what those discussions are.
I think
It's
we
not
could
me.
accelerate, we could do that in one. Why do we need to do it 3 times? Or do
If I
we?
can interject, there is the additional consideration of council deliberations over such matters being held in public and having the public having an opportunity to be part of witnessing and taking in the budget discussions.
Sure,
There's
but you don't need to do it
no
3
lose sight
times.
of that.
So all of these meetings are public,
Mhm.
and we can even say, this is the one that you want to come to if you care about the budget.
I think, Carl, you would agree. I don't need to dwell on this now, but it's the takeaway for Pam for our strategy session. How can we do this?
Well, I mean, so where I'm going with this, Pam, is it's 2 less presentations for you to prepare. I mean, you're burning the midnight oil, and that's not good either.
Well, actually, once the budget presentations come, most of the work for the budget is for that
It's an
preliminary budget.
incremental,
And that
yeah.
January 9th is actually pretty tight as well.
Mhm.
Because the capital is actually the easy part. It's going through and figuring
Yeah.
out the salaries and all that stuff that we do behind the scenes. And I think it makes your job easier and there's less meetings if the preliminary budget I give you, in terms of the general operating and the stuff we know about, is solid. And then council just has to discuss, are you doing the beach park, are you doing roads, are you doing this?
Yeah.
And that's where...
I think a lot of that will become very clear at the end of the strategy session. where we have said
Yes.
no on this, no on this,
Yeah.
yes on this.
Yeah.
And then I think if the operating and capex will be a lot better
And then that
understood.
helps us, but as we found, we need time to really get some accurate estimates of the costs.
I don't think anybody's going to hold you to a salary number that's 4% out.
No, I'm talking about the capital costs, because we've been hurt this year even, you know, I think we did our due diligence in terms of getting estimates, but I think now we've learned we might even have to do some additional due diligence.
Yeah.
Because it meant we actually couldn't do a project because the quote was off. So the January 9th, I mean, I believe that doesn't really slow down the process. The better budget I have for you for that preliminary budget actually speeds the process along, because then we just have the extras to talk about.
Is that
And-
January 9th, is that earlier than we would have expected last year? I think it
Um,
is. I mean, I seem to remember that,
No,
that,
yeah, it's
that was
at
end of
least- at
January
least a
before.
month.
Yeah.
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 I pushed it forward as much as I can, but
You're
I think,
working
I mean,
through
we're
the
already,
holidays here to do that.
so,
Well, that's also not good.
No.
So,
but I think that's realistic. I mean, we're starting working on it now, and then that gives you your core base budget. We can play numbers of this is what we'd have to tax to cover this, and you know, X dollars worth of extras. And I just see this year being a challenging year, trying to determine our supplementaries before. They were all so small. It was easy
Yeah.
to make decisions. We won't do
Okay.
that. We're going to have really meaty capital projects now,
Yeah.
and we may have to make some tough decisions. But I think Peter's correct too. It does form a critical part of the public process, which is a requirement of the charter.
well, you're
but
talking
this
to
is
the
just-
public
yeah.
guy here. So, I mean, there's,
But this
you know,
can
I can
definitely be
suggest,
weeded down. I mean, I think maybe we'll know. Sorry, I was just going to say, as of January 9th, we'll get a good feeling. And this was just sort of slotting them in to show that we may have them, but we don't have to have them. if
you
they're
know,
not
I would
needed.
suggest that nobody here wants you working over the holidays to get ready for January 9th. I could see that the preliminary budget is January 23rd, and we drop the February 6th budget presentation, and we go to the final one on February 20th. I think in absolute terms, this calendar is pretty good, Ron?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's completely flexible. Still think I'll aim for the January 9th, because with the water, sewer, and solid waste, which is a key part of the budget, that has to be done. So I might as well do, and it's all interlinked. So to do that, I almost have to have a complete preliminary budget
Well,
of the
I think,
non-utility
Pam,
items.
you and the team know well enough so that on the original one, even if it's quite a pig that comes forward, I mean, you know what's already in the hopper and what's likely to come, so even if you're plugging numbers.
So when we're talking about rebudgeting this year's projects into next year, you're going to rebudget. You're going to come up with new numbers for all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So the deliverable is going to change in price. You're not just going to pass the numbers through.
No. In the ones where it literally is just a rebudget, like something like the asset management, that ended up being the perfect number between the grants and what I want to spend. It's the 20 I need. But
No, it's
that
more
was
the concrete throwing stuff that's going to cost more than we
There'll
thought.
be some that'll just be a straight rebudget, and others, there'll have to be some consideration.
Okay, well, I would ask that all of us look through this quite carefully, because I mean the issue was that this year, for this year's budget, I heard from everybody here except you, Norman, that we seem to be seeing the same thing over and over, and that was a waste of everybody's time, most particularly yours, because we have a limited
Yeah.
resource in you.
Well,
So you're the
faster
critical
make the
part.
decisions then, but the key is that preliminary budget. So why don't I aim for the 9th, and if I'm realizing it's not going to work, then we'll just revisit it on the 23rd. But there is that absolute deadline for the utilities. I mean,
Yeah.
the water, sewer, and solid waste deadlines are somewhat inflexible in order to get the utility bills out
Yeah.
by the end of February.
Where is the utility bill? Here,
It's
February 23rd. Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty tight.
it's just its first, second, third reading and adoption. I mean, that's
Right. Okay, so we will resume this discussion as part of the strategy session. Yeah. So
And I think the council members should restrain themselves on capital expenditure asks.
well, I mean, I think as a general rule, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, that we are not looking for any new projects. We're looking to finish
Yeah.
some projects that have now carried over for a third year.
Yeah.
Although, having said that, I did have an ask in here that we'll be talking about at the strategy session, is one more shovel-ready plan, so that we're ready for a grant. Or not, as the case may be. How much did the Mid-Bayview shovel-ready plan cost?
I believe the Bayview design was 28 all in.
28 or 32.
Yeah.
So it's that sort of number is what I had in mind.
Yeah.
Because without
Which is-
shovel-ready plans, we don't get grants.
Yeah, so just as a reminder, we do have, and we will further that plan for the replacement of the PRVs. As part of the clean water wastewater for the tank replacement, there's gonna be a replacement PRV on Bayview.
Right.
That will form our standard template and standard cost. So we will have shovel ready for PRVs, which we did last year as well. And we will have the Bayview project.
Okay, well, this is something for us to think about. Do we want to tackle anything new? No, I think is the correct answer, because look at the overhang here. I really want to see us delivering on projects in, not to be political, but well before any election takes place.
I don't think we've got capacity for more new projects.
No, but as in,
That aside, your point aside, I don't think we're going to run more, that's for staff to, they would never say yes, but I think we're running out of capacity.
clearly. So let's leave this one where it is, unless anybody else has anything else to bring. Is there a motion to receive? I think there is.
I think so.
All in favour? Opposed? That carries. So we've received that report, and finally, oh, that was it for Pam. Thanks, Pam. Good stuff. I'm not sure that I like seeing you working so late to put all this stuff together, but
I didn't.
it's appreciated. And it's a one-time push, so I guess that's by definition sustainable. Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to Public Works Manager's reports. The first is an encroachment application. On page 45, we've read the report. Nye, anything else you need to tell us?
Essentially, the existing driveway is too steep. The owners had significant issues accessing their driveway over last winter, and this is a revised plan to lessen the slope a bit and provide an off-street parking lower down on the lot.
With a hammerhead turn area.
Correct.
And the recommendation is to approve it. Good drawings. Anything anybody has on this one? I'll take a motion to approve in a second. Now we're discussing. My only question is a highly nitpicky one, is can we get the fonts changed to a standard font? And there was one other question, are the people's names correctly spelled? In the
Yes,
agreement?
they are.
They are?
Yeah.
Which font are you talking about?
Of the agreement?
Probably as a result of it coming back to us this way from legal.
Yeah.
Um,
And the date is correct, 7th of February 2017?
Stated for reference, yeah. Oh, sorry. It should be November.
Oh, okay.
My apologies. Thank you.
Okay. Typically, I like to, anything with the footer that we see in the legal agreement, I like to read it quite carefully, but I haven't read this one. Peter. So, Peter, you're good with the agreement?
Mm-hmm.
Is it standard?
Yeah.
So what did the legal review then?
No, I didn't go specifically to legal on this particular.
Oh, this is, we're just
This
using
is
our
our
template.
standard
Okay, okay.
template for these agreements. And, so, there's always a couple of things that we are looking at in these things, and those are the, the conditions and the insurance sometimes we negotiate with. And so this one's at 2 million. It's pretty tough getting more than that on some of these, due to the homeowner policies that are currently out there. So
My only other question was that the agreement is between somebody residing at the place rather than owning the place? Would not the agreement be with the owner, not the resident? Presumably the same people, but
sorry, where are you looking?
on the agreement, page 47, between two residents residing at 85.
That's just legalese.
Yeah, because
It could
between
say,
the
it could
people.
say owner of.
So does this
85.
encroachment agreement survive sale of the property by these people to somebody
No,
else?
there's provisions for what happens if it gets sold.
Okay.
Comes to an end unless, we can work something out with the new owners and so forth. So.
Okay. Although the driveway will still be there. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
So it only survives if we attach a section 219 covenant, which then enables us to register it in the land title office, then it survives.
Which we are not doing.
No, it wasn't deemed necessary in this case.
Okay, so I'll move that we adopt the encroachment application as recommended by staff, subject to the terms outlined. I'm not going to read them all, but we'll take them as read. Can I have a second? And any further discussion? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. And then now, a report on the project status. Is Scott still here? No, he left, unfortunately. Okay, so starting on page 57.
So, prior to this this meeting and a recent meeting with AECom, we were working off a schedule that was drafted on September the 11th, and at that point we were still working on the details of the project, the different options, etc. The revised schedule, which was just put out on October 30th, shows us now with 40% of the project beyond the clean water wastewater deadline. To this end, staff have been working with the ministry and have submitted an extension request, along with 40% of the clean water wastewater fund total. Other municipalities have asked to a tune of 40% of that clean water wastewater.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's something we know. To bring council up to speed on some of the other developments, I have been in touch with our MP, and I alluded to it earlier. She actually walked it through the Prime Minister's office to the Infrastructure Minister's office. Long way around of saying that it is as we suspected. The actual administration is provincial, and we got that word back from Pam's office day before yesterday, and I sent it back to you. Where do we stand there? I will go to Victoria if we have to, if you give me the door to knock on, to make sure that we get this, because we all know we need to get this extension.
So I've spoken with the staff in the ministry that is responsible for overseeing these projects and receiving and reviewing the extension requests that they received, the voluminous number of them. The information that I got was that the province has been requesting extensions to the deadline of March 31st ever since the interior was struck with fires, preventing all of those people from advancing any of their projects. So there's been an acknowledgement early in this process that there are significant challenges throughout the province in terms of getting these things done within a very, very short time window. I would also advise that at the law seminar that I attended on Friday, I spoke with a couple of my CAO cohorts and who have received extensions on their project applications.
Have you received them?
Yes, they have received.
As in a
extensions.
year's extension?
Yeah, we didn't get into too much of the details. I think they're probably both.
But enough,
in that
anyway.
realm. Anyways, yeah. They're both significant projects. And
What sort of size are they compared to ours?
one was a $9 million or $8.5 million water treatment type project,
Okay.
and the other one was in the realm of 3 to 4, I think.
Okay, that's very promising, because ours is then chump change compared to that. So if they're extending those,
Yeah. So, anyways, it's it was a process, and it was an extended process, and I think one of them just received the official letter confirming, although they got verbal a little while ago. So, the the ear that I got at the province was very empathetic and understanding of
It
all
seems
the
like
points.
they're asking the feds. So there seems to be a bit of a circular situation happening here.
Yeah.
I'm happy to say it.
So yeah, bit of that. But you know, we are pushing all the
Okay.
corridors that we can.
Now, what about the thing that the email that we got from Pam Goldsmith-Jones' office that said our deadline was February 2nd?
I really didn't understand that at all.
That's a red
Because
herring.
it referred to 2017. Not
No, he already then he
2018.
admitted he got the year wrong.
So I'm thinking maybe it was an NBCF extension that we had an original deadline of, but I wasn't sure whether that even played into an explanation.
It's definitely March 31 today. Do we have a
Yeah.
plan B if we don't get the extension?
So in speaking to AECom, we believe that we can get the piping work and the tank work all complete by the deadline. It's all of the other restoration works, restoring the fences, restoring the land. There's there is we can push the contractor to get this done by the deadline. We are going to pay for it. The market's going to dictate what the true costs of this construction project are going to be.
Well, I will say that the argument that carried the most weight with Pam was that because of these artificial accelerated deadlines, the prices are being bid up, and if we were to extend it, it would take some of the heat out of the market. And she really got that. I don't need to remind you that she was mayor of West Van during the Olympics, and she said she saw that all the time because they knew that money had to be spent, and so they were just bidding up the price. So that's the kind of thing that I think resonates at the federal level, that they don't want to they want to be seen to be taken for a ride. But we, on the other hand, need a plan B. But I hear, so the answer to the question is you're working on the plan B.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
I will just add to the report a late change. We met with AECom today to review the detailed design drawings. Under the additional geotech, I talk about the design to replace the highway tank with an underground tank. The caveat to that is that the PRV, the fill PRV, the controls will be above ground in a chamber that is, do you remember the size, Peter?
It was 3-point-something meters by 4-point-something meters.
Yeah.
So roughly,
So there will be a structure above ground,
How high?
that was 1.5 meters high.
1.5 meters.
So
high.
head height. So it's going to be a shed.
Yeah, and it can be tucked into the bank of the slope.
Now the vessel that's going in there is not actually a storage tank. It's just a surge tank, right? So it's not very large.
No, it's going to be an equalization tank. So
Yeah.
it does contain some storage, but not much.
Yeah.
About 9 minutes of fire flow.
So irrelevant. It's not a fire flow issue
No.
or fire storage issue.
No.
Yeah. So I mean that cabinet is about the size of the green one outside the school on Bayview. Double that cabinet size, and a
Double
little
that
higher.
size, correct. Yeah.
And okay, so that's what's it going to be made out of? What's it going to look like?
It's a steel cabinet. Doors open on both sides. Essentially what we're doing is we're saving between 50 and 75,000 because undergrounding it would require a custom-made
Yeah.
chamber.
Yeah.
And we also eliminate the confined space aspect. So where you have 3 people going into a confined space, in this case, we would have 1 person doing the maintenance.
Yeah. Yeah, my only quibble there is that we're trying to make that into a little more publicly accessible area. And now you can have the steel shed there. But for 75 grand, I think we all understand that, right?
Yeah. Tucked into the back,
Yeah.
hidden from view as
Yeah.
much as possible.
And that's not our land, is it? That's Modi land.
I think it's not sure.
But it's certainly,
Check the highway
it's certainly dedicated to water infrastructure now, so nothing's changed. Okay, so can we have a motion to receive this report? Thanks, and a second. Any further discussion? No, you said everything, that you got out everything you wanted to. It's a good report, thanks. That's what I was looking for. All in favor of receipt and opposed, that carries. Thank you. So,
Peter, on
yeah, we've got one extra added item, upper chamber update.
So staff has had a couple of powwows regarding different ideas for reconfiguration of this space, and primarily our concentration so far has been on this space and office space. We haven't yet had our field trip upstairs to drill down on those things, but we are moving along the general work plan in terms of what needs to be done in order to create chambers upstairs, and we will be, through that process, figuring out what needs to happen, what the costs are of the physical reconfigurations, and what equipment and so forth will be required, and then putting a price tag to that so that it can be part of the budget process.
The new budget, 2018 budget. But we're going to meet there next week.
Well, we can still meet there.
What, on the floor?
Well, we'll have tables up there.
Oh, just folding tables?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, fine. Oh, so there's not the intention to have it ready in time for the meeting?
It's not going to be.
It's just going to be a meeting room. It's not going to be
Yeah.
chambers. This will remain.
Yeah, for the time being.
well, you need your plan here before we go there.
Mhm.
And you need a
Yeah.
plan here, and that's going to cost something as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing will be all itemized. So,
Okay.
but
I was
there's a
under
lot
the
to it.
Yeah, I was under the impression that you wanted it finished by the time of the strategy session.
If that was ever conveyed some time ago, it was probably a fond wish. One which
Santa will be
probably not very
We have
realistic.
this as a 2018 budget item.
Okay,
Request.
All right.
Okay, well, I'm sure we all look forward to seeing that. Will there be a thermostat in the new?
No, we thought we'd just,
Take out the one that's there.
Have a
I've already
fireplace.
checked. There is a thermostat. I've seen it.
We'll have a coat check, i.e. you have coats there to put on when you arrive.
Survival suit.
we didn't have heating in the budget, did we, Peter?
Actually, there will be probably a thermostat issue that we'll have to deal with in terms of
Yes.
the thermostat that works for both that room and the hall, which we found through the course of the election
When we had no
is
heat.
it's got some issues.
Okay, well, put it on the list. Okay, motion to receive that VOLB report and a second. Any further discussion? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. Onwards we go. Nothing from the mayor. Nothing from council. Committees. Ron.
Thank you. Tree committee met a few weeks ago. This has gone to Public Works and Administration around the neighborhood as well. The request was not very onerous. It's to top some trees, trim them, and potentially thin some of the smaller ones on the downslope for view purposes. The recommendation is, as staff has got here,
Thank you. Would you like to move that recommendation?
so moved as per the agenda piece.
Thanks. Second? Thanks. I have a second. Any discussion? Beyond what Ron's given us? No? I'll call the question. All in favour? Opposed? That carries. And there are no emergency services reports, so we'll move on to resolutions. The first is approval of the meeting schedule for 2018. The bolds are non-conventional dates, I take it.
Yeah, so January 9th and 23rd council has already resolved to move.
Yep.
So the only other ones that we picked out on the calendar were April 10th and 24th and May 8th and 22nd. So basically the mover of this is really revolves around Easter weekend, which is, so we got Easter Monday is April 2nd, I
The
think.
second is the Easter
And so
Monday.
we'd have a meeting on the 3rd, but we'd also have the Friday prior off, so it's a 4-day weekend. It's not so bad when the Monday's the holiday, but when
Yeah.
the Friday is also, it
Absolutely.
impacts the ability of us to turn out the agenda. So in terms of having sufficient weeks in between, if we move it to the 10th and then move it to the 24th instead of the 17th,
The
then
next
we-
month has to move
the
too.
next month moves, and then we're all lined up, and we have our 2 weeks between.
And we're fine with binding future council, which will be the meetings of November and December. It's not really binding. I mean, it's what it is. You can change it.
Yeah, they can always
Well,
adjust that if they
They're
find
getting
a need.
appointed on the 6th of November, and then they got,
Is that in fact the case? Just remind us of the new election schedule.
So the election in 2018 will be on, I believe, October 21st, 20th or 21st, one of the two.
Okay, so that, I mean, that I'm asking that for actually for the
Yeah.
next item, the acting mayor schedule. But okay, okay. So pretty cut and dried. Any discussion on that? Can I have a motion? Thanks. And a second. All in favour? Opposed? That carries. And then on to the acting mayor schedule. Now here, I think the final slot must end in October. And actually not at the election, but actually at the appointment of the new council, which is the 6th, the first council meeting of November, is it not?
Yeah.
Which will be the 6th.
It could slide that way.
So what I would
so-
suggest we do is that we make the schedule November to January for Bain, February to April for Barmeyer, May to July for Hughes, and August to the end of council for McLaughlin, so that we've got coverage. There's no need in doing October because October's done already.
What do you mean October's done already?
October this year.
Yeah, October.
Right.
is.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Yeah.
So I mean, it's just moving everything by, but also specifically stating to appointment of the new council.
Yeah. So you're saying to November 6th as opposed to October 20th?
Yeah, because the council continues until the new one's sworn in. It doesn't go into abeyance like the province or the feds do. Council's a continuing body, and we need an acting mayor. In case the actual mayor goes insane.
or his coup takes.
Yeah, or something, who knows? Insurrection. Okay, so can I have a motion as amended? And a second? Any further? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. You got it, Peter?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And this is the part we've all been waiting for, Glenn Dennison. We're finally onto the glass sponge reefs. So there's the revised motion is on the table. I will just give you a little bit of colour on this. I was very glad that Glenn came and gave us the expert input. It was a very interesting presentation that we saw, Fred and I, at the House Sound Community Forum in Gibson's. It was about a month ago now. The thing that I hadn't appreciated first was that glass sponge reefs are not protected in House Sound, as I had just somehow assumed. I did even ask the question at the time, will the commercial guys respect that? And the answer is yes, they will, because it's all to do with their license and permit. It's now on a map. They don't go there, whereas today they can go there if they wanted to. Drag their prawn traps, their nets, their lines, whatever it is they want to do. The second thing was how important the reefs are to the life in Howe Sound. Much of the Georgia Strait, and correct me if I'm wrong, Glenn, much of the bottom of Howe Sound is mud.
That's correct.
And so the reefs are actually the point source of the rejuvenation of the sound that we're seeing. They need to be protected in spades. The DFO representative was very persuasive, absolutely passionate about the point. She had a very great presentation. I wish we could have all seen it. She certainly made the case that we need to do something. And so this is the resolution. How it came about is that there's a task force appointed by the House Sound Community Forum, which I'm on, which I missed the first two meetings just for scheduling conflicts, but I went to the last one on Friday. And so they recommend that the membership, of which we are a member of the forum, passes these two resolutions. The first one being, as you read, I'm not going to read it all, so I will make that motion if I may.
Sorry, I was just going to say, with respect to the materials in the agenda, at page 63 is the letter from Ilaria Ledwig. And if you look at paragraph 3, it refers to asking the public to voluntarily avoid fishing in these areas with bottom contact fishing gear until further research, etc., etc. Bottom contact fishing gear includes. in this resolution, do you want to add something that basically, because the resolution as it reads doesn't really speak to requesting the public to voluntarily do these things, and how will the public know other than through materials? So in terms of requesting DFO to consult with local governments, perhaps we should also be asking them to provide signage, posters, brochures, and or other communication materials for the marina and for beaches and park locations. Because when you look at the list on page 67 of that material, they talk about the following locations have signs, and we're not on that list.
We have rockfish conservation signs,
Yeah.
but that's very recent, and there's only 2 of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good catch. I'll take that as a friendly amendment.
Well, I can't propose an amendment, but if you
But
want-
as you stated it, yeah, so I'll need a motion for that amendment, thanks. So it's the motion as amended, so it's now A, B, C, the stuff that Peter said, and now D, support initiatives. You could say that that would be included under D, but actually what we're saying is we're going to request DFO to source and supply the signage.
why not?
Why not? Like they stipulate, so, I'm all for that. Anything further? We have a seconded amended motion on the table. All in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously, as we suspected it would.
Good catch.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Good one. And that's what there is the illustration of how garbled this has become. This has gone through so many iterations, through the forum, through the task force, through the DFO, and back again twice, that a lot was lost along the way. Okay, so we'll move on to the second resolution then, coming out of recommendation from the task force. And that is that we fund something called a Marine Reference Guide. So I really should have prepared a presentation for you. Fred and I saw it. They've done this for Barkley Sound, which is on the west coast of Vancouver Island. It's multi-layer gathering of all the information and data that's out there on Barkley Sound and Clayoquot Sound, which is where Tofino is. Land use, diving areas, species at risk, all this stuff. It was an effort put together as part of the designation of Barkley, I never remember which one, Barkley or Clayoquot or both, as a UNESCO heritage area. And they'd like to do the same for Howe Sound. They being a yet to be formed entity, that was the discussion that we had on Friday, who would do this. The budget for this thing would be on the order of $250,000 a year, largely funded by foundations. The biggest of which would be the Moore Foundation out of Seattle. Gordon Moore was the president and CEO of Intel. You may have heard of Moore's Law. A lot of money in that foundation. There's some local foundations, one of which is based on Bowen. In order to provide some sort of local buy-in, they're looking for local governments to make a very small contribution to the total cost of the project, 10% in fact. Hence the number of $20,000. Then they divvied it up in various scenarios based on population or based on area. And our number came out to be, I think, $670. Peter, what was it?
631.
$631.
Change.
So what I suggested we do is just round it up to have a nice round number that we can do, because it's a 3-year commitment, this year and the next 2. Rather than try and come up with inflation or worry about it, just do 1,000. It's an extra $400 than requested.
That's scenario A.
Under scenario A, and they haven't quite decided yet. So we discussed which entity would do this, and they don't really have a good answer for it yet, because there has to be somebody, right, who has the skills in putting together these things. The Barkley Sound Marine Reference Guide will actually give us their template for nothing. So there's no development required. It's just some secretariat, 2 people, I suppose, being paid a fairly sort of living wage, but nothing substantial, plus office costs, plus hosting costs, etc., etc. Is it? Yeah, I'm tempted to show you on the screen, but it's pretty sexy. You do some ticks and boxes and colors, and all kinds of good stuff happens.
Wasn't that the presentation that Ruth Simon did with?
Yes. Yeah. So we have actually seen it, just as a reminder. My secret desire here is that this will then evolve into a terrestrial guide as well, which will inform land use and planning for how sound communities. There they are. So right now we have hard paper maps. Look at all the data that's available on the terrestrial side. That should all go into an interactive tool. A lot of it's supplied by the province. This tool it's pretty cool. Would you not agree, Fred?
Oh, I agree. I was also thinking that for the sake of this meeting, maybe we could make reference to the meeting that Ruth and the young gal that was with her, his presentation. That was last month, wasn't it? Or was,
Yeah, it was about 6 weeks ago, yeah.
yeah.
2 meetings ago.
Yeah, so if somebody wanted to hear the presentation on audio, they could research that,
Yeah.
read it, recording.
That's right. I'd forgotten that's what that was about. So this is the culmination of that request, and I would propose that we just round it up to show how important Little Lions Bay finds it. I mean, there are bigger communities out there, Squamish, Bowen, West Van, contributing significantly more than us. Whether they round it up, I don't know. But for the number, just to show some buy-in, I would propose that we go that far. So I'll make that motion.
You've got an A and a B, right? You
Yeah.
didn't speak about the scenario B. Was a different number.
Yeah, so
I don't
I'm proposing
understand
under B it would be $500.
Right.
It's just a case, they had different models for divvying it up. I don't know why they bothered.
And so is it going to be up to them to determine which
Yeah,
the one they're going to choose?
yeah,
A or B?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then I guess they ask us to send the money in.
Right.
So this is preparation for that. So I'll make that motion if anybody would care to second it. Thanks, Fred. Any further discussion?
This is part of the House Sound legacy.
Couldn't agree more. This is, and I have an ulterior motive. I'd like to see this turn into a terrestrial add-on that would really serve Lions Bay in the future. But even the marine reference guide is this. The Berkeley Sound one is. I don't know how they lived without it. And so, if anybody should have it, should be us, given our the huge jurisdictional overlap and boundary crossings and everything that we experience here. Okay, so there's a second motion on the table. Can I have all in favour and opposed? That carries. That's great. Thank you. So I'll communicate that to the task force, and we'll go from there. I suppose they'll send us a bill. Bylaws. The first being adoption of the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw amendment bylaw. Did I get that right?
Perfect.
Number 533. Can I have a motion? And a second? Any discussion? My only discussion, Peter, is it too late to say, can we between the first word bylaw and notice, can we put a hyphen?
No.
Or is it too late? It's adoption. Damn it, I should have said it before.
It's not the way the bylaw is cited anyways. Would have had, yeah. No.
We would have to go back, yeah. Damn it. Okay.
Live with the pain.
Was that calling the question? Question's been called. All in favour? Opposed? That carries. So that's adopted. And then first and second reading on the fire bylaw. So this one needs a little bit more explanation because it's just the first I've heard of it.
This needs a lot of explanation.
Okay, lay it on us. 107.
Okay, 1 second here. So, the reason this came up is in our fire bylaw 428, we already have provisions, which you can see from the consolidated bylaw that's attached, speak to, in particular, section 45 speaks to alteration of a dwelling to an extent that one would be required to install a sprinkler system. So the bylaw requires at the present time new residences to have a fire suppression sprinkler system. And then the following section there, if a person makes an alteration to one family dwelling with a sprinkler system other than to add a secondary suite, the value of the alteration is more than 50% of the replacement value of the building, then the entire building, including any secondary suite, must have a fire suppression sprinkler system. So that wording has caused grief in the past because it's opened all kinds of interpretation and has caused grief for the building inspector and the fire chief in terms of dealing with people who take issue with it and want to argue about it. So the intent.
Because of the nature of what the definition of the wording is, or the 50%?
50% of the replacement value of the building, how are you going to determine that? Is that based on $250 a square foot, $300 a square foot? Is it based on standard?
Because you don't speak to assessed value.
Yeah,
Okay.
and it's not assessed value, yeah, it's another way of doing it. And then, makes an alteration and the value of the alteration. Well, how's the alteration being valued? So all these things come into play. So it's been on the work plan for a while to get to this and get this clarified. What prompted me to do it now is the fact that I came across something that said you won't be able to amend these things after December 15th with the new Building Act. I'm still actually seeking clarification from the Executive Director of the Building Standards Branch on whether or not yes, you must sprinkler, or no, you don't have to sprinkler. Is a threshold is an administrative decision, and then the technical requirements of sprinkling would be governed by provincial regulation, which they're still working on and which haven't been finalized yet. So I'm anxious to find out the timeline for that as well. In the meantime, whatever sprinkler regulations you have in place, until they come out with the new regulations, will be the law. You'll still be able to enforce them. So I didn't know how long we were going to be in that state, and wanted our bylaw to be clarified. So that was the intent of the exercise to begin with. So initially I had come out with an amendment, which I'm just going to share with you so that you can see what I had come up with initially before I started changing it around. Oops. And the big changes here in the grayed out area are value of the alteration as specified in the applicable building permit, and then the replacement value of the building as determined by multiplying the gross floor area by the building of, so that's the means by which it would be determined, and then the number can change. It could be 250, it could be 300, it could be whatever you want it to be. And so the problem became that we still have some issues around justifying dollar values and so forth, and different builders are going to build at different values per square foot, and it's going to be hard to have a consistent methodology for what's fair, what's reasonable. So then we came up with the brilliant idea of doing it the way that you see it in your materials, and that is basically saying that if you make an alteration to a residentially zoned building which doesn't have a system, and the value of the alteration as specified in the applicable building permit, so that stayed there, is more than 75% of the assessed value of the building, as determined by the most recent BC Assessment Authority stipulated value. And so the idea of using that methodology was it was always going to provide us with a clear number. Anybody can look that number up and know in advance what that's going to be, what's the trigger going to be. They can pretty much calculate it as long as they understand what the calculation is going to be on the building permit value. However, when we started looking at actual assessed values of improvements in Lions Bay, we have an average of $225,000
yeah.
and a mean of 170. So what that did to us is
So when I do my $125,000 kitchen
way
reno,
too low, and you're
I've now got to re-sprinkle my entire house.
secondary suite.
yeah, the trigger's at 129 and 169, so that's too low.
Yeah.
So then I started looking at, okay, well, we could say instead of it being 75%, you can make it 300%, and then now we're talking about 390,000 or 170 times 3 would be, is that 55,000?
8 times 6.
510,000.
Yeah.
So now we're talking about a number which represents, okay, this is actually a substantial renovation of a building. And, you know, if you look at, so wasn't able to say what's the average square footage of a house in Lions Bay, because that would be an exercise that would take a long time. But if one just goes with an average of, say, 3,000 square feet, you know, it's probably going to be somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 square feet. But let's just say 3,000 square feet. And if you say, for argument's sake, that a replacement value to rebuild that home is, let's just say, $300 a square foot, you're at $900,000 to build a new house. If you knock it down and build again, you're probably going to spend that kind of money in that ballpark. So at what level should a requirement to sprinkler, you know, so if you build a new house, $900,000 house, you got to sprinkle. That's the way it is. If you do a $500,000 reno, so roughly, you know, if you cross that sort of, if you use 50% as your marker, is that an appropriate guide to say this is the threshold at which we're going to make you sprinkle? But then the building inspector started looking at some of the recent applications that he's getting in on renovations, and they're, you know, $400,000, $500,000, $600,000, but some of it, he's thinking some of it's not huge reconfigurations of walls and tearing out stuff. It's, you know, it's a kitchen, it's the bathrooms and maybe a bedroom or two or a rec room or something like that. But maybe it's more superficial than anything else. Obviously, it doesn't include, you know, he's not including appliances, but people can, you know, if they have the money, they're going to spend a lot of money on a kitchen rental these days. So, you know, the premise being you're going to get it back out when you sell the thing, presumably, or not, if you're just going to stay in it. But there's a policy aspect that council really needs to consider here. And that policy aspect is the whole reason for sprinkling is to provide the fire department, which is a volunteer fire department, an opportunity to get to the house if there's a house fire before it has flashed over and taken off and it's, you know, you're not going to retrieve it. They might save the building if it's sprinklered, but more importantly, or, you know, one way of looking at it is, more importantly, it's probably going to really give the fire department the ability to save that situation from growing and jumping to the next door neighbor's house or to the forest if it's backing onto the forest. And so it's really containing the hazard within the location. And as we face drier and drier summers and climate change, is this something that is going to be more and more of a consideration, that we really need to look out for the safety aspect of making sure that house fires don't suddenly cause a village-wide issue. On the other hand, we don't want to put, arguably, too much of an onus or burden on people who simply want to upgrade their existing homes. That being said, existing homes are older, that's why they're getting renoed, and maybe they've got 1970s, 1980s wiring, and now they're plugging in God knows how many appliances and electric things. So the longer you extend the life of a building, it's almost like, it's like saying, you know, instead of this thing getting torn down in 10 or 20 years, maybe it's going to be 40 or 50 years before someone tears this thing down because it's so valuable. So we're extending the life of buildings, and maybe these are the very buildings that need the protection the most. For the occupants themselves, whether it's the current occupants or future occupants, and for the neighbors and the rest of the village. So these are the kinds of policy considerations you need to think about, and there's a whole spectrum along the way there in terms of where you land on this requirement. And after saying all of that, the province might just blow the whole thing up and say you can't do any of it, right? But the fact that they're going to all the trouble of creating regulations, which I understand will have different levels, suggests to me that, no, it's not all for naught. So I think it is something that council needs to consider. You know, right now, the policy is, you build a new house, you have to put a sprinkler system in. Question is, if you reno a house, do you need to put in a sprinkler system? Some of the other considerations that come into play there, it's not just the number of heads that are required. There's, as I understand it, in the fire code, if you sprinkle part of a building, you pretty much got to sprinkle all of a building. You can't just sprinkle an addition to the building.
Yeah, what's the point? Who knows where the fire's going to start?
Yeah, and although there are some provisions that provide for heads only at certain exit egress points where your limiting distance to the next door neighbor is not enough. You can shorten the limiting distance by having a sprinkler system in that area by a window, for example.
What, in terms of setback from the neighbour's
Yeah,
building?
yeah.
But we don't have that in our zoning.
That's just, that doesn't have to be in the zoning. It's a building code provision.
Which
and
we don't
fire
have
code
today.
Provision. No, it's the provincial building
Oh,
code.
it's in the building
Provincial
code,
Fire
okay.
code, yeah. So there are, so one of the biggest aspects to cost in terms of doing a retro sprinkler system is the fact that in most cases in Lions Bay, that's going to involve installing 1.5-inch water line. Whereas right now they've got 3/4, right? So you've got to have 1.5 inch, which basically is 2 and splits. So that's where a lot of the cost is, depending upon the property and how long their driveway is and what they're, you know, if there's landscaping that the water's going through, it can be a huge cost. In other cases, it could be a fairly easy, relatively minor cost. So you just don't know. It could be anywhere from, you know, it can range from 10 to 20 to 30,000 just for that aspect, depending
Just
on,
for the line to the
just
house.
for the lay of the land.
And then you're
So-
demolishing walls and ceilings to put.
So a brand new house, a recent example, you know, cost of the sprinkler system in total installed was about $15,000.
Yeah, new house.
On a retro, that could be double.
Easily.
Easily.
So
And a
some-
mess.
And every room gutted.
Yeah.
The public side, the municipal side of that service would have to be upgraded as well. You can't just upgrade the residential side to 1.5 inch. We have to dig to the main and provide a new 1.5 inch service, and that's part of the service cost.
Up to the shuttle valve.
Up
I mean,
to
from
the-
the shuttle
up to the
valve to
property
the
line.
main line.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So
it's
you're-
not going to flow at that
Yeah.
unless there's a fire, and then there's hopefully only one goes off at a time.
Yeah.
My main question is, how many are we talking about? We have 560 houses in the village. How many will end up being sprinkled in the next 20 years?
I can't tell you that. All I can tell you is that the trends we're seeing involve renovations of properties with the prices that
Oh, no doubt there.
are out there now, and so we're going to see more and more retrofitting of, you know, or renovations, and the question of whether or not we're going to make them retrofit.
Well, I mean, I think your answer to the question there is, you know, in a new construction, it's easy to put in sprinkling. You know, you're down to the sticks. You don't have to drywall up. It's easy. It's the renovation one is the hard one.
Mm-hmm.
And do we have the right to force people to make a heck of a mess of their house because they've got a major renovation going on, to put in sprinkling where there'll be one in 100 will have sprinkling. Okay, maybe 1 in 50 will have sprinkling. So it's going to be
Well-
very hit or miss that they're going to be the people to catch alight.
I think you're seeing more and more. You'll see more and more rebuilds, like complete rebuilds. So you'll see more and more new houses with sprinklers. Any new development's going to have sprinklers, and yeah, you have to ask yourself, given the policy considerations, if somebody's going to spend $500,000 or $600,000 on a renovation for what could be a simple, you know, $900,000, they got a new house. You know, is there some point along the way here that if you're going to spend that much money, maybe the first thing you should be thinking about is safety considerations. And before you get the $10,000 countertop, maybe you should be sprinklering your house.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of people, they don't want sprinklers in the house. It makes it look like a hotel room or a conference
That's
center.
only if they've got clear cedar, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
vaulted ceiling, and nowhere to stick the sprinkler heads.
But so now you're talking about the potential for somebody to do a major renovation, $500,000, which doesn't go very far these days, on a house that's assessed at 250. That's way more than the 75 we see here in front of us. 75%.
Well, I know, that's why I said, it could be, yeah, the 75% was this was, get this in place, and then it was kind of like, oh, then I started looking at the assessed values. So it's kind of like 75% is not going to work. Question, if you want to use that formula, then you'd have to go with 200 or 300%, so that you're talking about a renovation of, $400,000 or $500,000.
By which time you probably emptied out the house and are breaking down the drywall anyway, so putting some sprinklers in would not be much of an issue.
It's going to vary depending on what people are doing, but yeah, there's more likelihood that they're going to be opening up walls to do things in any event. Now, in terms of other communities, what they require, White Rock requires sprinkling on renos, and they've got a 50% formula that's, I don't have it in front of me, but then there was a couple of others. The building inspector made some calls as well this morning to Belcarra, Bowen, West Vancouver, District of North Van, City of Burnaby, District of Maple Ridge, City of Surrey, and Resort Municipality of Whistler. None of them have a sprinkler requirement for renovation. However, I would note that with the exception of Belcarra and Bowen, we're talking about most of these municipalities have pretty skookum fire departments. So it's really, sprinklering is really something that comes into play for volunteer fire departments more so than city professional departments.
Well, I mean, you're telling me stuff I've never heard before. I mean, there's only one of us around the table who's been a firefighter. I mean, it seems to me that we need the recommendation as to where we should go. I'm not going to go and start researching sprinkler technology.
I can tell you what I think, but what I'm trying to do is lay out the policy considerations that you need to think about, and I think council as a whole needs to provide staff with direction on where council sees that policy decision coming down. Is it at the low end of the spectrum? Is it at the high end of the spectrum? Or at all? Yeah, I mean, there's lots of communities that you can point to and say, these guys don't do it, we're not going to do it either. There's nothing wrong with that, depending on how you feel about sprinklering and fire protection and various things that I've mentioned. So it's a tough one.
Well, there's a few issues around it as well, that it's not just for the us being on a paid-on-call department. The main purpose of a residential sprinkler system is for life safety of the occupants, because it provides a means of getting out when the building's on fire, whereas if you didn't have a sprinkler, you'd be confined to the room you seal yourself off to, and either hope you've got a ladder to get out the window or whatever. Notwithstanding that it is a benefit to the fire department too, that it does slow things down. I think the life safety aspect of it is enough, in my mind, to go ahead with some sort of demand that somewhere that we would make a determination that at this point they have to sprinkler it. But where that tipping point is, I really don't know. I looked at this and I thought, yeah, that makes sense, but now listening to your commentary, I think, maybe not. Maybe we gotta move the slider along the scale a little somewhere. But by all means, I think if somebody's gonna do a significant renovation to their home, 15 or 30,000 bucks isn't a whole lot compared to 50 or 500 grand. And I think the benefit of that extra little bit is immeasurable. They really do work. And going back to the difference in sprinklers, a residential sprinkler operates at a lower temperature, like kicks in at a lower temperature, mainly because it's for life safety, as I was saying. An industrial sprinkler, like you'd find in a warehouse, kicks off at a much higher level, but its whole purpose is to protect the structure. The residential ones are for the people, with a side benefit of protecting the structure. So, are we in the business of trying to keep our residents safe, or? do we not
Absolutely.
care?
We worry about fire all the time to the extent that we fund to significant amounts. We fund the fire department.
So one of the other comments the building inspector made was that was a suggestion that sprinklers will help save a building, but it's the smoke detectors that save the people. So as opposed to the sprinklers.
It's a bit of both. The sprinkler systems are a dramatic improvement over just smoke alarms. Smoke alarms need a lot of maintaining. You gotta be able to hear reasonably well in order for them to work. It's not the bird twerping or chirping in the next house. When I was with West Van, we did our fire prevention department did quite a demonstration on residential sprinklers. In fact, West Van was sort of leading the charge for the longest time in bringing new sprinkler technology into the industry. And they had a trailer where they had a little house, tiny little house, with an open front on it. And we stuck the fire chief and usually a member of council in it, and got a little garbage pail between them as they're sitting there, lit the fire in the garbage pail, and the residential sprinkler above them would extinguish the garbage pail before they were having any problems with breathing. I mean, they're phenomenal. They really do work. So smoke detectors can't help. Only if you're mobile you can get out of there. If you're not mobile, it's worthless. Sorry, I was kind of indoctrinated into that.
Yeah, you're a fire guy. I mean, this is big. It's
I
far
guess-
more than we can give 2 readings to tonight for first sight. I mean, I would like to actually consult, take this out to the community. Does the community want it to be protected at this level?
Well, the people who want to do renos are going to say no, because they don't want to spend that kind of money with their reno.
I think if we can define what a substantial renovation is, the incremental cost is low. I'm concerned about the mechanism that you're proposing here, which is the non-conforming use. If I read it correctly, I don't have to have smoke detectors. It's a non-conforming use. Or is this always in a bylaw, and everybody who doesn't have smoke detectors right now is abrogating the existing fire bylaw?
I can't answer that. I don't know when smoke detectors became part of the building code, but they are part of the building code.
No, I'm
so-
looking at the fire bylaw. It's in there. You struck it. Where's the current?
Oh, yeah, I mean, but I did.
It's section
it's basically
47.
Rewording is really all that is.
So
It's
you
just
struck
wording it
47.
better.
Did
Rewrote it.
Did we know this? That you're required by bylaw to have smoke detectors? I didn't know that. I have them, but only because I kind of.
I'm
Why
gonna
not?
guess it's in your insurance policy.
It's a code requirement.
Well, we put it in a bylaw.
Yeah, whether it needs to be in a bylaw, I'm not 100% sure. I just thought I could improve upon the wording, so that's why it got struck and
Well,
rewritten.
for
Well-
sure, all the new one's gotta be hardwired. That's a given.
That's building code. That has nothing to do with.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have a combined CO smoke detector. That's in our building bylaw. So I guess where I'm going with that is that not actually a building bylaw issue? I don't know, and I don't really care, although I prefer things to be in the right place so that people...
Well, the building bylaw can't really speak to technical requirements after December 15th in any event.
Well, so that's
all
where
the
we're
building,
going, yeah.
all the building bylaw is going to be doing, and all it really does right now, is provide a means by which the municipality administers the building code.
Well, so now asking about, as you very well know, I have a list as long as your arm of things that I'd like to see in our building bylaw to do with outdoor water features and. But I'm hearing you say if we get it done by December 6, 20, whatever the date is.
No, it won't matter. Anything that speaks to technical requirements that the province is regulating on will no longer be within the purview of municipalities.
So this will be trumped then as well.
Except that they have left open, for the time being, for sprinkling.
Only sprinkling.
Well, they've left open about 5 different categories of things.
What are the others?
I don't know off the top of my head. Don't have them written down here.
Although they may, in fact, also speak to sprinklering.
Yeah,
In
so
which-
they're temporarily unrestricted at the moment, is the way it's phrased.
So if they don't regulate them, then we need to. And if they do, then it trumps whatever we've done.
Basically.
And
So
your sense
there's-
is that they will, if I read the report right.
Yeah, they spend a lot of time preparing regulations on sprinklering, so it's just the whole regime and how it's gonna work and whether there's any administrative component for municipalities other than a yes, we're gonna sprinkler, and, but whether or not it will apply to anything other than new buildings, I don't know. Those are answers that I intend to have in hand for the next meeting, but basically, we need to get to third reading by next meeting and adoption by December 5th,
If we're going to do it.
if we're gonna do anything,
Phew.
yeah. So it ended up being a bigger bite than
Yeah.
I anticipated.
Yeah. Well, really what you're trying to do is tighten up on the definition of renovation. Because I don't think anybody here is going to argue with sprinklering new construction, residential construction.
We've had people argue that.
Too bad, it's in the bylaw.
Mhm.
It's the definition of renovation.
That's, they didn't get their building approval without it.
Well, there was, the way it's written, the way it has been written, there's room for argument in
Yeah,
terms
no,
of what
that needs to be tightened up
solutions-
on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, all we're doing is tightening up the existing bylaw. We're not doing anything new. The bylaw might be trumped very soon, but if it's not, we need to have something in place tighter than we have today.
Or it could sit there in limbo for months and months and months, years, while the government does whatever they do.
Well, they want to adopt on the 2nd of December, I think. Is that right, Peter?
15th.
Well, we need to.
No, when does the new building code
December
come out?
15th is the cutoff for.
Yeah, and it may or may not contain these provisions.
I don't like this myself. It's an invasive thing. I mean, your point is right. I mean, we're going into people's houses and saying, yes, you can do this big renovation, and it's not going to be a 15G job. It's going to be a 30 grand job, and we can sit here glibly and say, well, that's insignificant. There's somebody that's doing a $400,000 renovation, 500. But if I'm that person, that's a pretty meaningful number to me.
Oh, we're also going into the house and saying, where's your smoke detector?
So.
Because we say you have to have one.
So, I mean, so the yin and yang of this is I get Peter's argument, but on the other hand, the right number isn't obvious to me.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I could see that you don't have on renovation. I mean, I've lived in communities where renovation was defined as long as one original wall was left standing, it was a renovation, not a new construction. So lo and behold, people would
Do all but
wipe
one
the house
wall,
out
yeah.
except for one wall, and it's still a reno, and so all kinds of different rules apply. It's not new construction. Whether sprinkling was in there or not, I don't know. But
So I guess in terms of direction from council, what perhaps I could phrase it differently. Do you see yourselves coming down on the spectrum somewhere closer to the renovation having to be more like a new build, as opposed to somewhere lower down, having a threshold at, it's only 50%, 51%, and then suddenly you have to do it. If it's at the upper end of the spectrum, then perhaps it's easier to make the analogy to new construction requires it. This is practically new construction. You're 75% of the way to this being a new construction. So maybe 75% is the number.
but 75% of the assessed value, or 75%
No,
of
75% of the replacement value in that instance. Is what
using
I'm
this something like a $300 number or something.
So yeah, if you've got, say, a new construction or a replacement value might be, cost might be 900,000, then 75% would be 667.
Okay, but what you presented here is using the assessed value approach.
Yeah, I've done it both ways.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, the original
Well, I'll
was
take a poll
assessed.
on that one. Ron?
Well, if I'm doing this, I mean, the homeowner's gonna know what their costs are going to be, because you're probably gonna go and get a contract for 500, 600, whatever the number is, so there's a hard number. And, you know, you could go to your BCAA, or you can go to, I mean, I can see getting a, you know, a quick and easy appraisal before and after kind of thing. Somebody's gonna save 30 grand for, yes, sprinkler, no sprinkler. I mean, it's much easier to drop 1,500 bucks or 2 Gs to get an appraisal, which I'm sure we wouldn't fight, because we've just established what the value is.
You're saying an appraisal as a replacement cost appraisal?
Well, I mean, the assessment, I mean, is,
The assessed value isn't.
assessed value is
It's too low.
too low.
So it would have to be a
It has to-
replacement cost appraisal.
Yeah, you'd need a third-party document.
So instead of forcing people to do that, why not just pick a number and say, it's gonna be at least 300 bucks a square foot
At this time.
at this time? And then, yeah, I don't know.
I mean, we're going into a really messy area here.
Well, we've already been in that area. Our
Well-
bylaw has put us in that area already. The threshold is much lower, in
But let me
fact.
just ask, so Ron, the higher level question, are you for sprinklering or not for sprinklering? On, I think we're all agreed on substantial renovation. We can define substantial later. Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I am. But if I could just add in for the consideration of working on the assessed value, that I think you would make it so that anybody who has an older home is gonna have a lower assessed value on their place, so any renovation is gonna put them so high that they're gonna have to sprinkler every older home that gets a renovation, which is probably
Well,
at least
using the
desirable.
older home across the street that recently sold for $1 billion, there's a good case in point of a very low assessment when they bought it. They did a whole bunch of work, they're shown in magazines, the celebrity kind of thing, the whole cachet. So I guess there's a really case in point. I mean, he did some of the work himself, I think, maybe he did, I don't know. But I mean, we're back into this mess again. Definitely can't use the appraised value, because it's useless. Or it's, sorry, the assessed value, that's useless. We're back to the appraised and pick a number off that.
Okay, well, so I'm hearing yes and yes on substantial renovation. Norm, what do you say?
You know, I'm sort of more of an engineering mind on this, and I think what is it specifically that's being done in the renovation? If it's cosmetic, you know, it's one thing. If it's structural and walls are being moved and drywall's coming off, then adding a sprinkler system is a whole different story. If you're imposing all that demolition on a person who doesn't intend to do that, you're creating additional costs beyond just the sprinkling. So it's not an easy answer.
I think I agree 100%, and that's part of the mess of this thing.
Yeah.
Because as you said, every room gutted. I mean, who knows, cedar, no cedar, now, it just goes on and on and on. So that in fact the sprinkler becomes a driver in your rental cost.
Absolutely.
Which is probably why a lot of communities don't do it at all.
Don't do it.
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the choices you gave us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So to answer your question, yes, I can see sprinklering on a very substantial renovation that's effectively rebuilding the house.
Mhm.
And if we could come up with a good definition, whether it's, I don't think the assessed value approach is going to work,
No.
because that doesn't
It's gotta
reflect the value of
No,
the
it would
house.
have to be, well, it'd have to be an
It
extreme
has to be
multiple,
third-
obviously.
third-
to-
It would have, but even so, I think that would be inaccurate. If you went with 400% of the assessed value, I mean, who knows?
But if the lower the assessed value, the poorer quality and older house,
More
smaller
likely to be
house,
renovated,
the more
yeah.
likely
Yeah.
it is going to need to be, the more likely it is going to be a substantially structural renovation, and also you're dealing with something that's probably older and probably needs a lot of upgrading. So I don't know. I mean, it's not, from that perspective, it might not be a bad way to go.
Yeah, I mean, I can see the difficulty in making this definition. I don't like the sense that we're interfering, telling people how to comport their lives in their existing house. I could see making it voluntary for renovation and mandatory for new.
Can I pull on that thread a little?
Hmm?
Is there a way to incentivize sprinklering for renovations as opposed to absolutely enforcing it. So for new builds, it's not a question, it's just the law. But for substantial renovations, there's a way to incentivize it. I'm not sure what that would look like.
Well, their insurance costs would presumably be lower, but it sure as heck wouldn't pay for the thing in 10 years. I don't see how we would, what would we do, give them lower taxes? No, why would, no.
Well, you'd give them a break on their building permit costs is one way to go on that. So
Now we're getting really complicated.
well, not necessarily. I mean, that's the you know, in terms of other areas in which municipalities try to incentivize people to use new technologies and energy saving devices and so forth. I mean, that's what we're going to be looking at under a new building act is energy step code, and it's not mandated. It's going to be a case of incentivizing and encouraging people to do things, and you know, in developments offering them greater density if they take certain steps to, you know, make it more energy efficient. So yes, incentivizing is a potential way to go on this. Whether or not it would be, you know, whether or not the municipality has the financial tools within this process to provide enough of an incentive to
What was the
someone
building permit
to do
revenue
it.
this year? 10 grand?
So we could certainly look at that as well. You know, it's
Yeah. Can I just ask, how are we going to ban open fireplaces in new construction?
I don't know. That's a bit out of the left field for me at this moment.
But I mean, if the building code doesn't speak to it and says you can have an open fireplace if you want it, how's Metro going to enforce it? You know, Metro is trying to ban.
I don't
fires.
know, but that's probably something that's been talked about within the materials provided at Metro meetings in the past, I'm guessing.
No, they haven't thought it through.
Okay.
No,
I
I'm
certainly don't.
I'm
No.
still struggling to get my head around the province deciding what individual communities, all 268 municipalities in BC, want to do with their building regulations. You know, if you've got infinite amount of water coming down the hill, yes, I suppose you can have a fountain inside, but we don't. And we certainly don't want oil furnaces. But if they're telling us that we can't regulate that, well, okay, it's a different issue, but it concerns the heck out of me. Okay, so where are we on this? I mean, the bylaw as you have it, I don't think. I mean, I'll ask if anybody wants to move it, go ahead. But as it stands, 75% of the assessed value. You've already told us that's not going to work, so we can't give two readings to this one. We can amend it.
No, you know, or you could go with the other one that I gave you on table that is based on 50%.
Where does the
replacement
$300
value.
number come from?
That's just current values that are being used as
Is that-
rules of thumb.
300 is the number that's been used. Yeah. Okay.
No, it has been on some recent applications, so, or building permits. So
Yeah, so if you have a 3,000 foot house and you do more than 900,000 in renovation, more than 450,000 in renovation,
mhm.
that's 50%. Then you have to sprinkler.
That's our current situation. You know, minus the clarification of things. This is just clarifying how we're going to determine those values.
But I like that more, but I still think it might be a bit low.
I do too. I think
Yeah.
it's low.
Could be, you know, and I know that one of the other municipalities that the building inspector had come across previously in other discussions with his technical committee was essentially this kind of a thing, but 75%. So under that scenario, you might have something, you know, like in the 600,000 to 700,000 range before you have to sprinkle.
I would go with that number.
75?
75.
Yeah, a very
I
substantial
mean, at that
renovation.
point now where the money means less to the individual, clearly, and
The incremental cost. I'm
yeah.
sure
I mean, it can
15 grand's
they
15
can
grand.
make choices within their budget.
But then they take care of the ceiling's probably coming down anyway. There's the holes coming, the drywall's coming off.
Yeah, so in terms of, and I get where Peter's going with the volunteer fire department, the pending provincial stuff. I mean, okay, so this just dropped on the table, fine.
Okay, so
I would go with their 75.
fine. So I will make the motion then that we give first and second reading to the amendment bylaw number 535, using the option as presented by Peter on table for section 45, and I'll just read it out. If a person makes an alteration to a residentially zoned building which does not have a sprinkler system and the value of the alteration as specified in the applicable building permit is more than 75% of the replacement value of the building as determined by multiplying the gross floor area of the building by $300, then the entire building must have a fire sprinkler system or fire suppression system installed by a qualified professional. Do we need to define fire sprinkler system or fire suppression system further? Because I didn't see definitions anywhere in here about that.
No, because we don't want to limit technological changes. It's the wording here is slightly different than in the old bylaw. The old bylaw was
Didn't say qualified
a
professional.
fire suppression sprinkler system, but really what's out there are sprinkler systems and suppression systems. They're two different things, two different kinds of technologies.
But can I not put one sprinkler in my kitchen and say, there's my system? I'm sorry you don't like it.
Probably not, but possibly.
Okay, so that's still not good enough because we then have to define
No,
what we mean
because
by that.
a qualified professional would have to determine that that is adequate for the purposes, or that the building inspector and or the fire chief can determine that that is, in the circumstances, the best
Well,
it can
why couldn't we
be.
match it with what's for new residential construction? I mean, we don't know what they're.
Well, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying. We,
I mean, when
right
we
now, I
match
don't
it-
see an adequate definition of what it is that we want. Do we not need to say to the satisfaction of the building inspector and or fire chief?
The building inspector is going to rely on the qualified professional. The qualified professional is an engineer who's designing.
Qualified
this.
professional is my buddy Mike, who I slipped a case of beer, and he installed my sprinkler in my kitchen.
Hmm.
Yeah, but then after the $300, you've got, then the entire building must have a fire sprinkler system or fire suppression. So one in the kitchen just won't cut it.
Hmm.
No, it's satisfactory for my building. I say so.
No, it's the
Well, you
entire
want to
building.
match what the new residential is.
Well, even the new residential is not defined.
Well,
In other words, I don't want some guy.
Then we beg the question to Peter, so what's the new how do we define the new residential? Is it, Dave makes the call and says, I like this professional, I don't like that one, and come up with a new plan, or?
No, we don't need to define what's new, because it's all residentially zoned buildings.
No, what's the satisfactory system?
Must
Yeah.
have.
I think we
Well,
need
the
an extra
satisfactory
piece.
system is going to be determined by the qualified professional, not by you or the homeowner. It's by
too
the
loose.
engineer.
It's too loose. I think we either need an additional clause that says what a satisfactory system is, or maybe it can be covered by saying to the satisfaction of the building inspector and the fire chief.
I'm fine with that. That way it puts the onus on the resident to work with the building inspector and or the fire chief to come up with
Satisfactory system.
satisfactory system, third-party system design, something like that.
So after qualified professional,
Yeah.
then add and approved by the building inspector.
What guidelines does a builder have?
No, exactly.
The builder goes to the engineering professionals who design and install these sprinkler systems. Like they provide a B1 and a CB, and from what I've looked at, from what Dave's
You see them
shown me,
driving around all the time. Yeah,
They provide assurances, they speak to us, Public Works, to get static and dynamic flows that are coming into the residence. So it's not just a Joe Blow fire person, these are
no, I'm looking.
professional.
I'm worried about somebody who wants to skirt the regulation.
Mm.
Well, if the building inspector's involved,
Yeah,
he's
so-
gonna halt work.
I think that would cover it.
Yeah.
But then will somebody say that's an unfair regulation because it's at the whim of the building inspector because there's no written regulation?
No.
There is code out there, I just don't know if it applies to single-family homes. There's code for multi-family dwellings
Sure.
that specify exactly where sprinklers have to be.
We've also
Is there
got,
an existing code for residential?
yeah, you've got all kinds of NFPA regulations on fire suppression systems, so we could include that in.
Yeah, but it's not in the building code, is I think what you're asking.
Yeah, I don't think it is for single family or residential.
If it was, then
buildings.
everybody would have to do it. It'd be clear.
So Peter,
So-
you got your amendments or anything?
So you're okay with you, but we will not get finessed by saying to as approved by the building inspector.
No.
That will cover us. Okay, so that's my motion. Second on that? Okay, I see a second. I see 2 seconds in there.
2 seconds.
2.5.
This is first and second reading. I believe that we really need to go out to the community as well. We need to pound the phone lines a little bit to understand what it is that people want to see here. I have no extra grind. I would like to see it in new construction. We're really, and I think we're all agreed on that, for new construction, right? We're talking about renovation.
Which is already in our bylaw, but just improved upon the wording,
Yeah.
and you've just improved upon it some more.
Yeah,
We haven't actually changed anything for
Are
new
you
construction.
writing this week?
Am I?
Yeah, you're probably gonna write, because you're gonna do the remembrance day stuff.
Yeah.
Just like you did with the beach committee thing, do,
Well, you saw the amount of input
Well,
that gave, but
always.
at least we put it out
well, yeah, but at least you made your effort here.
there. Okay, fine, I can do that.
So sorry,
Okay,
did
so-
you go with 75, is that what you did?
75, yeah.
75.
75 at 300.
Mhm. Okay, and if necessary, these can be tweaked upon further
Yeah.
review.
Yeah, because we've got one more reading to go.
Mhm, yeah.
So the technicality
Well,
here is
that's a-
2 readings, you can still change for the third reading.
That's a very generous number.
Well, it's a major renovation.
Yeah.
You may as well do it.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you?
Hey,
Okay.
These guys.
Well, I think it's the two scooping fire departments, and we're in a different
Well, yes, and
thing here.
I mean, let's face it, we're talking about 10, 11, a dozen builds in the next 5 years. This is going to apply
It
to.
might be high,
Yeah, exactly. So it's not going to make a huge difference to
No.
the fire risk of the village overall.
which is why you're not gonna get any feedback on your.
Well, it's also, are we going to inconvenience a very few people for nebulous benefit? So we need to think about these things before we do third reading. And I'm sure there may be an outcry. Maybe people think it's a fantastic thing. I have no idea. I don't have a read on
We'll
that.
find out who's going to be building.
Okay, you ready for the question? On the amended motion? Well, no, I made a full motion. No amended. You've got the motion, Peter.
Mhm.
Nobody needs to hear it again. No, it's been seconded. All in favour? Opposed? That carries. Did you really mean to put the cat amongst the pigeons like that?
The further I got in.
Well, I mean, I think we all understand the deadline issue here, right?
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Drivers.
let's get that going. Okay, so where are we now? Correspondence, is that correct?
Yes.
Fire bylaw. Oh, one more thing. Sorry, if we can just go back to the bylaw notice enforcement bylaw, Peter, on page 106 of the package. I noticed that Lions Bay doesn't feature on the signatories to the North Shore adjudication thing, agreement. Yeah.
I think we signed on after the original.
Yeah, I think this is. I mean, I assume.
Mm,
Oh, I'm talking nonsense. It's there. It's only 3 lines. Sorry, I beg your pardon.
okay.
Scratch that. Okay, good. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Correspondence. Ron, you want to do the honors?
Good, there are 4 pieces of general correspondence. The first one's on mobility pricing, Mayor's Council Workshop invite, it's on the 15th.
I'm going.
You're going, and thank you very much for that.
And just as remind me, please, colleagues, I think you all said you didn't have any particular input that's been quite technical.
Yes.
Fred, you gave me a few extra words which I'll communicate in the workshop. This is something of a tail wagging the dog because this decision is all being made in the Mayor's Council, which I'm also on. So, sort of double representation. But I'll go just
You're in
to...
the right crowd.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. G2, microcell resolution notice of wireless harm. This is an information piece. I don't believe there's any,
No, there are some asks in there.
I missed this.
A suggested approach.
Page 4.
I read this thing quite carefully, and it was a little sensationalistic. No basis in fact, just a lot of claims. I think these are the kinds of people who didn't like smart meters because they also are tools of the devil. So I suggest no action, but not because there isn't an ask, but because I don't
No,
think.
well, I agree at least.
So can I just get nods on that one, Peter? You,
Nods in the palace is burning,
So-
okay.
My understanding is that there has been work on this with, sorry, I was just reading it this afternoon. So there is antenna systems protocol template developed in 2013 by FCM and the Canadian Wireless Council. So I think there's been some consultation.
FCM. I don't. FCM is going to tell me how wireless works all of a sudden.
There's also in terms of model municipal access agreements, in terms of what we allow within our highway rights of way and so forth.
Yeah, but that's for us to decide. When somebody with an email address at shaw.ca and gmail.com starts writing to me asking for resolutions, that's my first warning flag. One question I did have was, is it true that public consultation on the placement of cell towers is mandated? As it says on bottom of page 1.
I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case.
Okay, well, that's something that we do. Now, this is microcell, right? These are little small things dotted around communities. But cell tower, we are certainly looking at. Public consultation?
It's all part of the process.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay.
It was included in the proposals.
It was.
Yeah.
As in mandated, not just courtesy.
As in that they would do. I don't know if it's mandated. I'd have to do some research.
Okay, fine. Okay, so no action. Everybody good on that one?
Okay,
Norm, I see you nodding. Yeah. Okay.
no faster, Norm. Here we go. Sailor C, this is, Carl's got his handle on this, and he was given carte blanche to deal with this topic. And he's got one outstanding matter on this topic already.
No, that was something else. This is asking for all kinds of resolutions.
2 resolutions.
Two, not all
The
kinds.
second of which I think is more important than the first.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So they have a list that they're working on, right, that they're considering. I think we're on that list of applications for House Sound. And so piping up with some praise and da-da-da-da-da
Yeah.
might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, it's not my understanding that the government of Canada approves UNESCO applications. But
Yeah, I can't speak to that.
in fact, I'm almost certain it's the United Nations that does that. But okay. Yeah, so I mean, this one is a little more official. I think they actually have an official email address and website as opposed to Gmail. What do we say?
Well, I agree with what Peter's saying, that the second's more significant than the first, if I'm reading them right. I'm really not a fan of these declarations
No,
of days.
I know you're not. I knew you'd say that.
It just seems like it's a waste of breath, but who cares?
So, I mean, would we support a motion to praise and recognize the application submitted in 2017? Who would we send that praise and recognition to? The Salish Sea people?
There's a link there, I don't know what that has. But
You know, when the ask is as nebulous as this, say, this is our ask, and
Be clear.
and write it for us.
Yeah.
So my inclination is to no action this one. Yeah?
I'd already responded to it,
Fine? Okay.
He nodded quickly.
unless there's a contrary. Ah, good. Norm, silence is good, thank you. G4, Peter, you had one?
Yeah, so that was G4. So that was the one that you have on table from Civic Info on deadlines for consultation regarding passenger-directed vehicle services. So the ABC at the bottom is the key information for council if anyone's interested in
Do you want to hand
taking
those out?
part. Yeah, I did already, didn't I?
No.
Oh, sorry. My apologies.
Whilst you're doing that, we'll conclude the resident correspondence, which is in here, which Carl has already responded to.
Yeah, I've already responded. Should that not be in these minutes, or will it be in the next? To this letter from resident
my apologies,
junk fix.
I must have missed that. Sorry.
Carl, I had a big question mark on this, like, what is this person talking about? Are they talking about?
Well, I already asked you that question, so you can ask me.
Very lengthy to and fro.
Like,
No, I didn't get any response to my response. Eventually, I worked out what I think this resident may be thinking is that the future desalination plant for which we've reserved land for 50 years from now is a salt plant to make salt.
Well, that's my best guess, but it's so vague as what he's written here that, I don't know.
So I wrote back and said, you do understand this is to make potable water, not salt,
Yeah,
right?
I thought
And,
your
and,
answer was,
and there was no further response.
okay.
So I no further response unless I hear back, but I'll handle that
So
one.
that's done, and Peter, we're back to you.
So I can address this. I'm on this. I know about this, and I've already sort of half formulated the response with council's say so. I'll run it by you before I press the button on send. It's essentially the response is of the nature of multiple studies exist, including one done for the city of Vancouver 2 years ago. Please dust that one off. Many of the claims of government hold very little water because it was a promise made during the election that they'd bring in ride sharing. Please call it ride sharing, not passenger directed vehicle services, for heaven's sake. Who do they think they're fooling? And the government now needs to decide, are they going to fulfill their promise or not? And the one other point that I was making was that let's not confuse taxi drivers, who will be inconvenienced unless they become Uber drivers themselves, and taxi license holders. Taxi licenses are there for the asking. The province has just issued 175 new ones at the cost of $4 each or something. They may change hands at high numbers, and so I would very much like to see how many have changed hands at these $1 million prices we hear about. Because why would anybody buy one? Because you can
Get one for $4.
get one from the province on application. The government is ducking and weaving because a constituency of theirs is cutting up rough that they don't want Uber and Lyft in here. I'm very sorry, but the people do. So now they have to decide what they're going to do. So that's going to be the substance
So
of our
that's
response,
in-
but I'll let you all see it before I send it.
That's in your hands then, so we are done.
Okay, thank you for that. So motion to action and receive and action correspondence as discussed. Thanks. And a second. Any discussion on that one? No? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. And now we will move to the next item on the agenda, that is welcome packages. That's an information report. I don't propose to go through it. There's some requests there. Peter, anything that we need to know about other than what we read in here? I mean, I think the thing was most of this stuff is on the website already. You were just going to provide links under a page. Sounds like a good solution to me. Jim sent some suggestions on mapping,
Yep.
which we may want to include. I think this is within staff purview. This came about by me asking, can I see the package that we give people? And the answer was, we haven't had a package for a long time. But seeing as we now have a website that contains all this info, let's just consolidate that into a page and we're done. Everybody good with that? So motion to receive and second. Further? All in favour? Opposed? That carries. And on to public questions and comments. Professor Dennison, that's you. Any comments?
No, other than it would be nice to generate a letter to the DFO from Lions Bay saying that you endorse their closures of the reef.
That will now happen as a result of the resolution that we passed. So one of it was, point A was to do with advising the DFO accordingly, and C, D, and B, C, and D were other things. So yeah, we'll take care of that administratively. It's good stuff, right?
Very good, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So now tell us, once the DFO designates these areas, do the commercial guys stay out, or does it have to still be policed?
Now, what happens here after the voluntary closures is there's an invite-only stakeholders meeting, where in the room are all of the people that want the closures and some of the people that may have concerns about the closures, like the Prawning Association, the Sport Fishermen, the Crop Association. And basically they talk about the aspects of the closures, like the enforcement ban around the outside of it, and whether they want these areas closed or not, because they may decide they don't want areas closed even though they know there's sponge reefs there. Typically the DFO, because Canada's under this mandate to close a certain number of areas, will close them, and they'll just move forward with this, particularly if they get a lot of community support. So Lyria Ladwick, who gave the presentation, I believe, to you that you listened to, is just waiting for these letters to come in, and they're coming in from all sorts of agencies and municipalities to support.
And then the DFO uses that to backstop
Yes.
their claim that this has widespread public support.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Which it does, I think. If anything, it's going to improve the fishery.
It will, and I think that's one of the education points that they have to make, is that the bioherbs are actually not only habitat for nurseries for rockfish.
Yeah.
Rockfishes are like the canaries in the ocean. If we start losing rockfish, we probably will lose the oceans there. And one of the healthiest rockfish conservation areas, by the way, is right here in Lions Bay, right out in the front of the marina, because it's well protected, well guarded, and there's a lot of citizens that report poaching going on in there. And currently, right now, there's probably a school of about 1,000 to 2,000 members of yellowtail rockfish down there, just below the marina and that boulder wall there. It's absolutely beautiful.
It's fantastic.
As well as a dozen other species of rockfish.
Okay, well, thanks very much for your engagement. We hope we see you here whenever we need to. So please, we're here.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to closing the council meeting under the grounds of 91A, B, C, D, E, F, I, K, J, K, L, and 92B and D. I hope you're happy, CAO Dijon.
Okay, well, we've got everything covered.
Motion to close, and a second. All in favor, opposed, that carries. So I will stop this thing. Okay, we're resuming the meeting at 10:42. Nothing to report out other than the meeting has been adjourned until November 14th at 6 p.m. in the upper chambers of council. And with that, I'll ask for a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and a second. All in favor, opposed, that carries. Meeting adjourned.